Are we on?
Hi, everybody. Can you all hear me? We're with a very special guest again. His name is John Bruce Yeh. Welcome, John, from Chicago.
Hi, Andy. Thanks. Great to be here. I'm so happy to be on your show. You are my hero because we've connected every week at this time, and it's become an amazing, you have done an amazing service, not only to the clarinet community, but the community as a whole. And I would say it's, you know, in the Corona cloud, we are all familiar with the Corona cloud. Yours is an amazing silver lining. So I would say, even though, you know, we are in the cloud of Corona, I'm gonna change my wardrobe several times. These are difficult
times. He's trying to show up my Beethoven t-shirt. I'm not enjoying this one bit.
Well, I love your. I every week I love your, you know, Squeak Big and your Beethoven with the mask. So I'm just trying. You're inspiring me to do so many things. And bravo to both you and Lorenzo for the beautiful concert I was hearing this morning as I woke up. The Beethoven. Oh my gosh!
Yeah, that was July 4th. It was our last concert, quote, of the season and our first concert with audience since January. And I'm very sorry. We've been trying to use this program to encourage people because things were going well in Hong Kong, but I'm very sorry to report we've had another wave and the halls are closed and we're back. You know, we were going in a great direction. Thank God we had that concert and they showed it, but it's been a tough haul as it has for everybody, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing this. Lorenzo, come say hello since you're mentioned.
Hi, John.
Lorenzo.
Hey,
Lorenzo. Okay, well, let me. I actually have a very long intro before we do anything because John's such a regular. He doesn't mind. I'm going to ask you all, please like the Facebook page, Andy's Licorice Talk, because that's where we have all our information. You're sharing this on everything, right? And my advice is, this is the 13th, lucky 13th show, and I think John would agree with me. I literally go back and listen to everyone with a pen and paper, and I take notes, and I come off with really inspiring stuff from every single guest. It's really educational. So I really highly recommend that you use this as an educational tool as well. So let me introduce Mr. Yeh. We usually start with how I know the guest. The problem is I know him too well and I've known him for too long. So the first thing I'm going to say is he's probably the most loyal viewer. There are some people who've been writing in. They've watched every show, but John is there in real time. He's up at 8 in the morning, every single show. And this is the only downside to doing this show with him is he's become like an integral part of all the shows. He writes about 18 or 20 messages and he's like a walking encyclopedia. Every time we're like, damn, what's the name of that conductor? Or what's the name of that guy? And he just writes it right away. He's like this walking, you know, he has so much experience and he knows what's going on. So we're actually going to miss his comments on this show. But by the way, I'd love it if anyone wrote in and let me know who has watched every single show so far. That would be really great to know. There's been a few people who've written in. So the other thing I want to say is the inspiration, I've said this a few times, to do this show came from a mutual colleague of ours, the new principal horn player of the Chicago Symphony, called David Cooper, who's come and played with the Hong Kong Philharmonic, of which Lorenzo and I are a part quite a few times. And he was doing chats and interviews, and he did one with John and Stephen Williamson, both clarinetists from the section, and that's what inspired me. I said, boy, those are really terrific chats, and Lorenzo said, you should do these, and here we are. So we're going around, and I never let the cat out of the bag, but it's too obvious. So Stephen Williamson will be on at a later date. So that's all good. And of course, we're going to have their mutual colleague, Lawrie Bloom, who really deserves a proper send-off after 40 years and, you know, not having played his last concerts, but he's looking forward to coming on. I think he's watching, and we're looking forward to talking to him. So let's go on to Maestro Yeh over here. As I said, we can't even talk about, all the ways we know each other. But for me, if I had to say the most memorable ways, there were two of the most recent meetings, and they were both in Hong Kong. One was 2013, right, John? Okay, we played the Rite of Spring here, and we needed an extra clarinet in the section. We only have 4, so we needed another bass clarinetist, and we needed an extra percussionist. So we decided we would invite John to come and play in our section, and his daughter Molly, who's a very fine percussionist, to come and play in the percussion section. And that was the very first orchestral concert they ever did together. And I was extremely pleased, because I remember you shared a program of the Chicago Symphony. You did a little interview, and they asked you about any special concerts outside of the Chicago Symphony, and immediately you mentioned that as a memorable performance. So we were really happy to be in the Chicago Symphony program. And the last time we met was very touching. He had already become an honorary member of the Hong Kong Philharmonic Clarinet section, but was it, when was Goethe Dameron? 2017 or 18?
I think 18.
18.
18, okay. So we performed and recorded the concert of Goethe Dameron, finishing our ring cycle. The whole ring, yeah. And John was doing a music festival just over the border in China. Well, I guess Yo-Yo Ma had a festival or something you were playing in. Yep, and
in Guangzhou.
In Guangzhou, which, now we have a bullet train, John. It only takes 40 minutes. 40 minutes to Guangzhou.
Oh, was it? It didn't. Yeah, it took me a little bit longer. It took me a couple of hours to get back.
You wouldn't have taken it. It's since then, and I mean, it's just incredible. Shenzhen is 18 minutes, but of course, at this moment, no one can move. I mean, everyone's locked down immigrationally. But anyway, so John came in. He had a few days. He finished early. Came and stayed with me. We twisted his arm to do a really, really informative masterclass at the Academy here. And he did something for me that I would never do for him. He sat through 6.5 hours, okay, of music.
It was spellbinding. And I was honored to be there for the final performance recording session of your entire ring cycle, which is absolutely astounding. It is truly world class, and you and Jaap van Zweden, your music director, have really made the level of the Hong Kong Philharmonic to such an incredible international standard that this ring cycle is an amazing landmark. Just like in the 1960s, Scholtes with the Vienna Philharmonic, I would say these are comparable landmarks in music history. So I was honored to be there, and I was delighted to hear this performance. I was just riveted. I mean, Jaap got me a beautiful seat, like in the 6th row, right in the center. And I'm like, wow, it's just like all the singers were amazing. The orchestra was absolutely beautiful. And not to mention the clarinet and bass clarinet playing, which was, the highest standard ever. And so this was a real treat for me. And it just happened to work out because Jaap had been conducting us earlier that season. And I said, I'm going to be going to Guangzhou to be in Yo-Yo's festival in January. And he said, oh, that's the time we're going to be doing Goethe Dameron. You got to stop up in Hong Kong. He said, I'll get you a good ticket. So I said, sure, maybe Andy will put me up. And it all worked out. And I had such a great time then. And it just, all these experiences, because those weren't the only times I've been in Hong Kong.
Oh, no.
The very first time was 1986 with the CSO, and you weren't quite there yet. But
that's before me, and I've been there over 30 years. That's amazing.
Yeah. Our orchestra went on a tour with Barenboim, and we played in Hong Kong. It was completely different. I remember landing in the airport, which was in the center of town. That was the most dangerous airport landing in the world at that time. And, it was just but spectacular. and of course where you play now wasn't even there, it was underwater, and so we were playing at the city hall, and it's just a different time and a different place. But since then I've been there many times, and to play and to listen, this was a real treat to sit through 6 hours, and they fed us in between, which is very important for me, of course.
And we had a great meal afterward. I mean, I felt so bad because we were just drained, and you were all, but we had a guest, Chi Yu Mo from the London Symphony. He was playing extra as well. And I guess we knew each other.
He's my counterpart in the London Symphony. We bonded at that.
Yes, he's an E-flat player in London. Yes, that's true. That's true. So that was just fantastic. So those are the two most memorable times. But yes, you've come through with Yama. You've done master classes, recitals. I've seen you many times on tour. I've seen many of your master classes. We'll talk a little about that later. So anyway, as you can tell, we need to get back to business, because we could just talk for hours just making small talk. So we're gonna get into Mr. Yeh's illustrious and, in my opinion, very special career. Now, if you read his biography, he'll put he's the first Chinese member of the Chicago Symphony. Asian member of the Chicago Symphony. Sorry, the longest serving clarinet player in the history of the Chicago Symphony. But for me, which he never mentions, and I'm extremely impressed with, is he sat in every single chair. Okay, in any major orchestra. I mean, I don't know of anyone who's done that. And how long have you been in the orchestra now?
I'm starting my 44th season. I joined in June of 1977. So I've completed 43 seasons, beginning my 44th. And
so, in my mind, okay, if you put in 44 years in an orchestra on the level of the Chicago Symphony, and you've sat principal, E-flat, bass, and second, and have prizes from major international competitions, and is actually quite known as a very special bastard horn player on various CDs, which we'll get to. I mean, I think we're literally talking to one of the most versatile clarinet players on the planet, and with a lot of longevity. And for me, that's an extremely special thing. So, and you've always been like that. You've always sort of thought that's the greatest thing, to be versatile and be able to do a lot of things. I mean, ever since I've met you as a kid, that's always been something you've really wanted to do and have done.
Well, the circumstances kind of led to it. First of all, the bass clarinet opened almost all of my doors. Opened my door to Youth Symphony, opened my door to Juilliard, opened my door to the Chicago Symphony. And so the bass clarinet is very, very close to my heart. And it's one of those things that I sort of fell into when I was in the American Youth Symphony with Meli Mehta, Zubin and Zarin's father. He was the music director. They needed a bass clarinet player to play the Khachaturian Piano Concerto. And so, as Lorenzo will testify, the Khachaturian Piano Concerto is one of the most important solos for the bass clarinet in the repertoire. And I didn't own a bass clarinet, and I said, well, if you get me a good instrument, I'll attempt that part. And they got me a beautiful, at that time it was the Selmer with a low C, and it was beautiful. And I played it, and that I was hooked. It was just like, oh, I love the bass clarinet. And then luckily there was an opening. I tried to audition at Juilliard, but I missed the deadline for the March audition, so they only had an opening in the bass clarinet department at Juilliard, which was chaired by my teacher Joseph Allard there. And I was able to apply and take an audition in September on the bass clarinet. And so I got into Juilliard in September of 1975 on bass clarinet. And then I started taking auditions my very first year. I auditioned for the LA Philharmonic, for the Cincinnati Symphony, and finally for the Chicago Symphony.
Well, hold on. You're going too fast. Before Juilliard, you were pre-med or something.
That's right. I was a pre-med student at UCLA. I grew up in Westwood in Los Angeles, and I just my parents are both scientists. My dad was a structural engineer. My mom is a biochemist. And so they expected me to go on in the sciences. They are both music lovers. So they supported and appreciated my love of music, and they always, encouraged me to join youth orchestras and to play chamber music and to take lessons. And they really encouraged me in those, but they expected me to go into a scientific field for a career. So I dutifully followed their expectations. And when I graduated from high school, I immediately entered at UCLA in a pre-medical course. And so I had to take physics and biology and chemistry and calculus and all those really dry subjects. And at the same time, I'm playing every single moment. I'm playing chamber music with my friends. I'm playing in the university orchestra. I'm playing in the American Youth Symphony. All I could think about was when I would have a spare moment to play music. And so during my second year at UCLA, after having won all the music awards, being a non-music major, everybody's kind of looking at me and saying, who is this guy? And so I won
but hold on, you won the Frank Sinatra Music Award, right? Now, did he present you with the prize? Did you meet him?
He did.
Wow.
He did. Yes, look at my
awesome.
pictures. You'll see pictures. The thing is that he's an alumnus of UCLA, and he endows this award every year for outstanding young musical talent. And so I auditioned and I won the prize in my second year at UCLA. And he rarely came to present the award on himself. He'd just send a check and have somebody present it. And so that year he decided to show up. Oh, here it is. Here's Teresa. Say hi to Teresa.
Hi, this is John's wife, who's a very fine clarinetist in her own right. So, hi, Teresa.
She's the best clarinetist in the house.
I'm listening somewhere else, so there's a delay.
Wow, blue eyes. How can I?
So
he's close.
There's Frankie.
Wow.
Me
Wow, man.
The Frank Sinatra Musical Performance Award on the stage of Royce Hall in 1974. And that was the year before I decided to tell my parents, well, I think I'm going to try music as a career. And to their credit and to my delight, this was at the dinner table, I'm telling them, I've done my research. There are a few colleges, music schools that I like to apply to. And, I just want to give it a try. And they looked at each other and they said, well, we want you to be happy. And if you do your best, we will support you. And that was, besides their genes, that's the best gift my parents ever gave me, to their support. Because I talked to a lot of music teachers who have really, really talented music students, and invariably they're Asian. And they say, I'm so frustrated because my student is so talented and I want him or her to go into music very seriously, and their parents won't let them. They want them to be a doctor or an engineer.
Yeah.
And so I tell them, I say, well, just tell them my story. My parents gave me the best gift they could have, and that was their support when I wanted to follow my heart's desire. And I practice what I preach. My own daughters, I have 3 of them. They all have their own interests and their own passions and their own talents. And, sometimes the talent and the passion doesn't exactly coincide. So, it's like, let them follow their heart's desire and make their own path. So I was grateful to my parents.
But John, I'm really glad you brought this up. Because in the case of Molly, who we just mentioned, the percussionist who came to Hong Kong, I mean, she is an accomplished percussionist in her own right, went to Juilliard and so forth, played with us, has played professional. And guess what? She's now a very successful chef with a cooking program on TV, on the Food Channel. And I mean, just think about that. I mean, she pursued one interest, one passion, and then as her backup through life, she just developed another passion, and she followed that. And you've never squashed her. She had a very good career in music. Now she has a very good career there. You've never said, no, you have to be an accountant, you have to do this. She made it work somehow. And I think that's a great lesson. Yeah.
become her passion.
And if you don't make it, if you do try music or something else and it doesn't work out, it doesn't mean that you're going to be homeless for the next 70 years. And you'll find something else. Or because you studied it, you found something else and went in that direction. Look at Lawrence Gilliard Jr., who we had a couple of weeks ago. He started as a clarinetist, and then he just became a movie star just because, as backup, So
isn't that something, the way how life leads you, how your path will create itself is so amazing to me. And I'm very thankful that I was encouraged to follow my heart's desire.
Wonderful. I want to share my father's cousin was a horn player. He was a German Jew, and after the World War II, he fled to Israel. But his passion was business. He had an MBA. He wanted to do business. He couldn't find a job in Israel, so he used his horn playing. He became the second horn player of the Israel Philharmonic as his backup career. Forget business was too, and then later on he used that knowledge to manage the orchestra and so forth. So it all kind of worked out at the end, and it was all just following his heart, and so I'm really inspired. I think, and you were in medical school. It's one thing when you're sort of sitting there at 16, but it's another thing when you're on your way and they say, well, I'm going to try this funny instrument,
Well, I wasn't in medical school. I was in pre-med. You have to go through college and get a pre-med.
Yeah.
So I didn't get that far, but I know people that have switched further along in their careers, but they are few and far between.
Great. So now I want, in fact, before we go there, you of all people know a huge part of this show for me is shout outs to the older generations, especially those who aren't with us. It's very important for me to document all this. Now, you've had some tremendous mentors. So before I personally want to hear about something. I'm curious, but let's start with LA. It was Gary Gray, I think, who was your teacher at that time.
Gary Gray was my teacher through junior high school and college. And he really he is a great like a psychologist. In order to get me to do what I needed to do, he used some very, very interesting ways of psychology. And some of them were pretty pointed, but he got the point across. And he's a wonderful musician and a wonderful versatile performer as well. Talk about versatility. He would leave all of us in the dust because he not only plays all the clarinets, he used to be the bass clarinetist in the St. Louis Symphony. And, he played on all the TV and movie shows in LA when he came there. He played saxophone on My Three Sons. There's that show from the 1960s. He played the saxophone solo on that. He played flute. He was so versatile. So that really inspired me. And I learned by osmosis that was the thing that everybody should do. If you're a musician, if you're a clarinet player, you at least should play all the clarinets. That was a given. And so I was blessed with that upbringing, that training. But he was my second clarinet teacher. My very first clarinet teacher, when I was 10, was a fellow by the name of Gordon Harrett. And he studied with a guy named Glenn Johnston, who had studied with Perrier in the Paris Conservatory. And so there was this lineage of French clarinet playing that came through my very first clarinet teacher, Gordon Harrett. And I've recently reconnected with his son, Keith, who ran an orchestra up in Northern California. So I've kind of kept in touch in the Facebook era with people that I haven't seen in decades and haven't heard from in decades. So he was very patient with me for my first 4 years of studies. And then he said, well, I've taught you everything I can. I think you should go find another teacher. And my dad and I said, well, gosh, I just love my lessons with you so much, Mr. Herrick. You know, is there some way that you could continue? He said, well, then my price is going to double. And then it was like a way to kind of shove me out of the nest. And so my dad said, well, let's look around. And so he called the Mitchell Lurie. And Mitchell Lurie was, probably the most famous, well-known clarinet teacher in LA at the time. And he happened to live like maybe half a mile from our house. So he calls Mitchell Lurie, and Mr. Lurie says, well, I'm really busy right now, but there's a guy that just moved to town, and his name is Gary Gray, and he teaches clarinet at UCLA, and maybe he'll take your son as a student. So my dad calls Gary Gray, and Gary Gray says, okay. So we set up lessons, and lo and behold, Gary Gray lived literally half a block from where I was, where my parents lived. Oh. Literally. So I would walk half a block for my clarinet lessons, and it was just, but then a couple of years later he moved away, so I had to drive. But that was amazing. But he would go to Aspen for the summers. He was on the faculty at the Aspen Festival, where he was very versatile. He played in all the orchestras, led the jazz band, and everything. But I would stay in LA for the summers in high school, and I needed a teacher. So he said, well, why don't you call Michelle Zukovsky? And I said, sure, because Michelle was very well known. And she was so helpful to me, especially the year before, the summer before I entered Juilliard, in really, really going over the orchestral repertoire. So my hat is off to all these three teachers that I really had a great formative training in my hometown of LA. Actually, I was born in Washington, D.C. And that's a different story. But as an aside, I probably heard, the first concert that I ever heard when I was 2 was with the National Symphony. And you know who was principal clarinetist of the National Symphony in those days? Was the master that eventually became my mentor, Harold Wright. So probably my very first orchestra concert when I was 2 had Harold Wright playing. And but then we quickly moved to LA after I was 2, and then I had these 3 amazing teachers, and that was when I decided to go off to Juilliard. After 2 summers at Aspen, I did actually go to Aspen in 1973 and 1974, studied with Gary. I won the concerto competition when I was 16 in the Aspen, and I got to play the Weber Concertino with the Philharmonia. And it was, 1973. And I get to the rehearsal, and there's this like conductor, and he is like, wow, he started the first note. Tum, tum, ta, ta. And I said, wow, this guy's good. And it was Herbert Blumstedt.
Wow.
And I was like, wow, Herbert Blumstedt is a monster. And he was so like easygoing and very, very low key, but he was so passionate. And so that made a real inspiration for me. And so that was a great experience. And then we've had Herbert Blumstedt come here. He's like 92 now. So he's almost more energetic now than he was when he was 45, when I first met him. And so we kind of reminisced about that. And he said, oh yeah, that was my only time I ever went to Aspen. It was one of my, it was my only time. And I said, well, I was the beneficiary of that time, believe me. That really made an impression on me. So then after my second year at Aspen, my summer, everybody was saying, so where are you going to college? I was still, in high school. And I said, well, I'm going to UCLA and studying pre-med. And they said, you got to be kidding. They said, with talent like yours, you have to nurture it. You have to, develop it. I said, that's where I'm going. And they said, you should definitely go to music school. You can always go to medical school later. And I said, oh, well, okay. And then, it's 6 months later, I was like, I was thinking of what these people were saying. And that's when I told my parents. Yeah. And plus I met a lot of the Juilliard faculty at Aspen, because Aspen probably still is a real Juilliard summer school. You know, Juilliard in Indiana used to have a lot of students go there for the summer. So I met a lot of my future colleagues there.
Who was your clarinet teacher at Aspen?
Gary Gray, because he'd go there. He would go there during the summers, and I was, you know, I was left with Michelle during the summers in LA. But then one summer I decided to go to Aspen, and I studied with my teacher Gary, and I had many wonderful experiences playing in the Aspen Festival Orchestra. It was my first real professional experience, and I got to play bass clarinet in Ein Heldenleben. My boy Mike Drafton will appreciate this. He's probably watching. He better be watching.
He's watching. No, he's definitely watching. Before we go, I mean, you have so many regards, but let's start with this. There's 3 past guests in the show. All send their love. Frank Cohen.
Love you, Frankie.
Nicolas Balderu.
Oh, bravo. Oh, I love you.
And Charlie and Ayako.
Charlie, I'll see you tomorrow, right? Yes, we're going to do a class for the Juilliard students tomorrow with Charlie and Ayako. Oh, fantastic. And I just, you know, I have to give a shout out to all your guests, because, you know, when you go and take a look at all these amazing artists and amazing educators that you have interviewed throughout this, you know, 13 weeks of your show, I look at myself like, gosh, you know, I'm still a student, you know. If I look at like Michelle, who's had, you know, like a 60-year career in the LA Philharmonic, and Stanley, who's had like a 62-year in the, it's just like, I'm just a beginner, you know. It's just like, I aspire to be like these masters. Yeah. And Frankie, you know, I just like, we have bonded over so many different experiences in the past, but I continue to learn from hearing what these masters and these dear friends have to say, you know. And you, I have to give you so much credit, Andy, for being able to elicit these memories and these nuggets of wisdom from all your amazing guests. I think it's a talent. You know, you have so many talents. Yeah, playing in incredible music and playing tennis, and you know, it's just like but this is one of your talents that has come to light so recently, and you are doing an amazing service by interviewing all our colleagues from all over the world. And so this truly is the silver lining to the Corona cloud. I really, really have found, you know, first of all, the time to reconnect with all you great, wonderful colleagues and friends, but also to gain the knowledge. You know, I listened to Charlie, listening to your live streams on Fridays. It's just like, wow, you know, I'm glued to the screen, and I hear all these things that I know now why you're such an expressive musician and educator. It's because we all take all these incredible influences from everywhere in our lives. And the more experiences we have, not only musical, but life experiences, informs not only our playing, but our communication. And that's what it's all about. It's bringing the whole world together through communicating. And, you know, somebody like Yo-Yo, you know, one of our great friends and mentors, Yo-Yo Ma, you know, that's his mission, is to communicate with every last person on the planet in every way that is possible. And so it's just like finding ways to connect, finding ways to touch people in their hearts and their souls. That's what it's all about. And so it sounds like the last line, and I'm going to be signing off now, but
no, that's great. No, because I'm, you know, I mean, I appreciate your words, but it's so educational for me. I mean, and as you say, I'm friends with a lot of people, and I need to. There's another communicator who's a past guest who just got on. Wenzel Fuchs sends all his love.
Oh, Wenzel.
He's not so bad either.
Dog, Wenzel. Yeah, I love hearing him. You know, that's the thing. The Berlin Philharmonic, Wenzel, you guys are on the cutting edge of of dissemination of music all over the world. Teresa and I have subscribed to Berlin Digital Concert Hall for several years. And, when this lockdown first started, you were the only music that we heard live. And it was just very, very special. And then Andy, your orchestra came on. We can't get together with our colleagues in the Chicago Symphony now. We are still on lockdown. We don't have a season. Our season's been canceled until at least January, and then who knows when we're going to be able to get in the hall. So we are filling the void by hearing you guys and my great friends in the Taiwan National Symphony. They've been doing concerts online, and just it's been the new reality. It's to hear our colleagues playing from all over the world, and in a way, it's brought us so much closer and so much closer to the music.
Yeah. Well, anyway, because you can't meet your colleagues, not that it's a good thing, but that's why you did this interview, which inspired me, and we're with you now, and all these people want to keep on hearing all about your story. So we're gonna go because I'm absolutely fascinated by Joe Allard. I want you to tell me about him as a teacher, because he was someone I almost studied with, and I heard so many wonderful things about. And I think Eddie Daniels studied with him too, didn't he?
Yes, he did.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of great players, and he also was versatile. He played sax, and he played bass clarinet and everything. And so I'd love to hear a little bit about he was your teacher at Juilliard.
He was.
Right.
And the reason I ended up with him was twofold. First of all, one of my teachers at Aspen in the summer that I was there right before I entered Juilliard was John Moses. He played principal clarinet in the Aspen Chamber Orchestra, and he was a student of Joe's. And he said, when you go to Juilliard, study with Joe Allard. And I said, okay. And so that was, and I when I auditioned for Juilliard, they had filled all the clarinet slots. So there happened to be an opening in the bass clarinet department, and Joe Allard was the bass clarinet teacher because he had played bass clarinet in the NBC Symphony with Toscanini. Wow. Made a lot of recordings, legendary recordings with Toscanini on the bass clarinet. And so I loved the bass clarinet, so I said, fine. And so when I got in, I entered as a bass clarinet major, but Joe said, well, you're very versatile. You play the clarinet. You can change your major if you want. You don't just have to be a bass clarinet. So I said, okay. So the second day I was at Juilliard, I went down to the office and I changed my major to clarinet, but I still studied both clarinet and bass clarinet with Joe. So and he also the saxophone teacher.
Yeah, I'm actually more, we can get a little geeky with him just for my selfishness. What kind of things did he work? I remember I called you out a million years ago. You warmed up with something. Rose one, right? And yeah. I said, you studied with Joe Allard, didn't you? And you said, how do you know? And I said, because everyone told me that was the first thing he worked on. Is that right?
Oh yeah, and it is challenging to this very day. I was just trying to play that the other day, and Joe was very big on knowing and utilizing the overtone series. So it was like he wasn't performing anymore, but he would take my clarinet, and he would show here's the overtone series, he'd take one note and produce all the overtones just by changing the air direction and the air shape. And so that was one of his big deals, was really knowing which partial you're at and how to get it without, moving your fingers. You have to move your air, and you have to create the activation with the reed just with the air. And it doesn't really have to do with your fingers. It has to do with the air. And so that was a major lesson. And to this very day, it's like, if I'm having trouble with going over registers, all I do is, don't use the register key. So I just keep the register key off. it's hard, but you know, at least it gets you to aim the air in the right way, you know. Or when I was practicing this one, you practice that without the register key. That's hard. You know, and then when you finally get the register key on, it's easy because the register key is only kind of a helper. You have to focus the air using your whatever mechanism that's invisible inside your mouth will allow you to do. So Joe was very, very keen on using the overtone series as knowledge to be able to get you to produce a focused and you know, refined sound on the instrument, because otherwise it's you're missing, it's all invisible, so you're missing a big part of how to produce a sound. You know, string instruments have it so easy. You know, you can see every last thing that they do. They move the bow, they move the fingers, that you can see the pressure, you can see the speed. All of that is invisible when we play, which is one reason why our instrument really is the most difficult instrument to play at an artistic level, because not only is everything invisible, other wind instruments are also, but it's not intrinsically a musical instrument. It is an anti-musical instrument, because everything that it does, it starts, I mean, oboe players are so, you know, jealous because we can play low notes soft, right? You know, but you know, in nature, is a low note soft really like a big virtue? You know, if something falls in the forest, it's bong. You know, so an attack is really important, and a diminuendo is really important, and those two things have to be cultivated on the clarinet, like on no other instrument. You know, other instruments, attacks are easier to start. On the clarinet, you know, it kind of ekes out. A diminuendo is easy on other instruments. You know, the bow, kind of like naturally. A diminuendo has to be cultivated on the clarinet, because the clarinet likes to expand in volume, in dynamic. It needs to be told to diminuendo. So that was one of the great things I learned from my mentor, Harold Wright, is really cultivate the diminuendo, because the clarinet's not going to do it for you. You're going to have to hear it in your mind's ear and cultivate a diminuendo. And I always listen to great instrumentalists and great vocalists. I mean, you know, the bottom line is we want to emulate the vocal style, the vocal sensibility of music, because the voice is, the human voice is the original instrument, and we want to emulate that. So if you listen to great singers, or even you listen to yourself sing, you know, you don't necessarily get that to happen if you just blow into your clarinet. You have to hear it first. And the first note, you know, every note has its own diminuendo on it, and other notes have growth on them, but you have to know which ones have which by listening. And so in order to have a to tell a musical story, you have to be able to hear it first, which brings me to my second wardrobe change, by the way. I'm going to put this guy.
Yes, yes,
we're
going to talk about him.
You've seen this one, but I'm going to put it on because a lot of us in the Chicago Symphony owe a lot to our late colleague Arnold Jacobs, who was the tuba player in the orchestra when I joined. And he had a saying that said, "Be a storyteller of sound." And then his motto was always song and wind. So he would be the teacher to a lot of us, a lot of wind players, a lot of, especially, I think most of his students were trumpet players. They weren't tuba players. He had a few woodwind players. I got to take a few lessons with him. But his motto was always, it was like a mantra, song and wind. And the story, be a storyteller of sound. So you have to be able to touch people on a deep level. And the way you do that is by hearing something in your ear that you can imagine, your mind's ear. The imagination is so powerful.
Yeah. You know, how long ago? 30 years ago, I had a hernia operation, and I was for the school of, you know, lie down and have someone jump up and down on you and see what your support is. And I started taking lessons with disciples of Jacob's, and finally did come to Chicago and took a lesson with him. So many of you know him, and if you don't know him, we have to talk about him for a minute, because he was a legendary Chicago Symphony tubist who I believe lost a lung, didn't he? He lost a lung.
Well, he had very small lung capacity. He had emphysema, so he had a very small lung capacity. But I said, well, how do you play the largest, the instrument that requires the largest airflow? He said, just take more breaths. And that's simple, you know. If you're playing a long Wagner bass clarinet solo, you know, I had to prepare a lot of those. You just take more breaths. And if you're singing something before you play it, generally that will indicate where you can take a breath, you know, because if you sing something, you know, you could probably play that entire segment in one breath just on the clarinet, because you can't. But why would you want to if a singer takes two breaths? That's what I'm, you know, what crosses my mind when I am learning music is that, how would you phrase this if you were to breathe as a singer? I think that's the bottom line. And Arnold really planted that seed in all of us. And you know, one of my my musical hero is Ray Still. He was the principal oboist of the Chicago Symphony when I joined, and he literally is my all-time musical hero, because we played so much chamber music together. We made recordings together. I sat right behind him on so many different performances. We had a Chicago Symphony Winds together. He considered Arnold Jacobs his principal teacher, and he would say, you know, he was a fanatic about singing. He'd go into his studio, into his home, into his basement, and just sing all day long, just to hear what it sounded like and what it's supposed to sound like when he plays. And by golly, when you listen to him play, it's all about singing. It totally is. And I think, you know, for all of us clued in musicians here, you're probably all nodding your heads right now, because all the people that are listening on, I think, can appreciate that. And so sometimes, you know, with the little idiosyncrasies and the reed being terrible and, you know, stuff going over the break and things like that, you can get involved in different minute details about why something isn't working. And then you can kind of forget about the song. But then when you bring it back, oh, just think about the song. Arnold had this saying where he'd say, you know, don't go into too much analysis of what you're doing right or wrong. He goes, that'll lead to paralysis by analysis. He said, just listen and order the result. Just have a concept, have a picture orally, and just make it happen through song and wind. And he said, you know, you need wind. Just suck it in. You know, there's nothing about, you know, tightening you cannot control your diaphragm. Don't say, you know, use your diaphragm, because you can't control it. He said, that's rubbish. Just suck in the air, you know? And so you got these, he used to set up brass players with these little contraptions, that would show the airflow. This little tennis ball or this ping pong ball that went up and down, or a paper bag with a tube in it. All these things were just to get you to realize that all you need is to suck the air in. And then we have this exercise, just a visual. See, visual aids are so important when you play or when you practice, because if you have this visual aspect of your sucking in air and expelling it, then you kind of know where you are. And he was an avid physiologist. He knew the body's mechanisms very well. And he would tell us, when you're at rest, when you're just kind of sitting around watching TV or doing nothing, how much air do you think is in your lungs? Oh, you have to think about that. You got about 15% of air, and you can still talk and you can still expel it and you can still blow until it's completely empty. And then when your body is so upset that it has no air, that it's afraid it's going to die, and then you release, but how much air is in your lungs now? 15%. Well, it's not going to do very a good job if you just use that 15% and squeeze it out. It's going to sound like real hard work when you play. So why not utilize the remaining 85% of your tank? And in order to do that, you have to consciously inhale it so that you fill up, because what's going to happen is the body is normally wanting to return to that point of equilibrium, which is just 15%. So you have to consciously utilize that part of the tank that is not comfortable for the body to use. It wants to get rid of 85% of the air because all it needs is just 15%. So you want to harness that 85% of the air to make music out of it. So that's why he says song and wind. So that's the geekiness of, playing the clarinet and using the air, playing any wind instrument, but really using the air and taking the air in unimpeded. He says it doesn't do any good to go, or to go, any of that gasping only means that you're creating some sort of an impedance when you breathe. All you want to do is so loose. Take in a complete breath of air. And so oftentimes you just have to remind yourself, because your body's natural tendency is only to take in 15%.
I'd like you to, in the Chicago, the fact that you have the shirt and he was the tuba player in the orchestra. I mean, there's something institutional almost. I remember when you guys were on strike, you'd have pictures of Bud Herseth, Adolf Herseth, the first trumpeter, and it's like they're almost trademarks of the era when I was listening to Chicago Symphony, 30, 40 years ago. You still hear brass players talking Bud and Jake. There was something about the two of them, the low tuba and the trumpet. Can you talk? It seems like it's never happened before, and it might never happen again. What was this Bud and Jake, marriage that you hear people talking about to this day, decades later?
Well, it's a legend. It's a legendary orchestral anchors. These were the anchors of the orchestra. And they really, a lot of it has to do with the way our hall is set up. Our orchestra hall in Chicago is unusual, and it does not promote the inner voices. Where we sit, we really, really have to try hard to project our sound in orchestra hall. And that's why it's so pleasurable to play in a great hall like Carnegie Hall or the Amsterdam Concertgebouw. If we go on tour, it's just like heaven, because we can sit there and not have to really, really work hard. Well, Bud and Jake just internalized these, the way that the hall was set up, and it was like, you hear everything from the back so well. So they were really the leaders of the orchestra. as much as you think the leader is up front or the leader is up front, the leader really is behind you, because you hear them and you play with them. If you try to hear something up front and play with that, it's not going to be together, because the sound goes out first and then comes back. It's just not possible. So they with our hall, it was not really easy to hear from side to side. The stage is when I joined the orchestra, the stage of Orchestra Hall was very, very wide, and it was relatively shallow. So we could hear what came in from behind us, sometimes too well, but at least we could hear that, and that really created the precision that our orchestra thrived on and cultivated. You know, Schulte was all about precision, and it wasn't just seeing what you saw from the front, it was hearing what came in from the back that really, really makes the orchestra play with such togetherness. And I think Bud and Jake had the responsibility of forming this togetherness, and you know, they worked very hard to get the brass section to be so unified, and the rest of us, you know, in a way, were overwhelmed by this. We did our best, and sometimes, you know, when I first joined the orchestra, or even more recently than that, people would make the one of our managers made the remark that, oh yeah, people are talking about the Chicago Symphony string mime section, because when you play a Bruckner symphony or something that's or Strauss tone poem where the brass are so predominant, then you can see the string players, but you really can't hear them. And that's sort of like a caricature of the Chicago Symphony, you know, Mack truck. You know, they used to call the Chicago Symphony the Mack truck of orchestras. You know, those things were all sort of played up by, when I first joined the orchestra, the Chicago Symphony was riding this incredible wave of world success, this crest. And Schulte was all about that. You know, it was like the precision, the gleam, the power, you know, and you know, of course there were moments of delicacy and nuance and beauty, but those things were overshadowed by the power and the precision and the gleam. So it was fine, because it brought the level of worldwide recognition of the Chicago Symphony. Oh, Chicago Symphony Brass, famous, you know. But nowadays, okay, we've I think become more equalized in the different sections, and we play with a greater sense of balance and greater sense of intonation. All those things have become refined since I've been in the orchestra. I've seen it happen little by little over the years, you know, with new incredible, beautiful colleagues coming into the orchestra, you know, putting their contributions. Every member adds to this incredible collective, so that the total is much greater than the sum of the parts. It's really becomes quite magical.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about you in the orchestra, because as I said, I'm still flabbergasted at this idea that you've sat in every chair comfortably. So let our viewers, if they want to hear you specialize in any of them, in any of these chairs, I believe you've made at least one recording, and probably many, many, many in all the chairs. So if you had to tell me the recording you really want me to listen to you playing second clarinet, bass clarinet, E-flat clarinet,
Yep.
and principal, give me the list right now.
Okay, I brought it out. Okay, here, I took them off the shelf. See all my records?
Wow.
I have 5,000 LPs and almost as many CDs.
Whoa.
So I pulled off the shelf some of my historical recordings. Okay, here's the first recording I made with the Chicago Symphony, my second week in the orchestra.
Playing what chair? Bass clarinet?
Bass clarinet. It's Petrushka 1947. So I'm playing bass clarinet and third
Autographed by Stravinsky?
Oh, no. Well,
I can't read it.
I mean, but it's not, it is autographed by Stravinsky, but that's only the printing of the album.
Okay.
Yeah. I never met Stravinsky, even though, you know, we did live in the same city for several years together. He lived in L.A. Right before he died. But this was my first Chicago Symphony recording. I made it in my second week with James Levine, and it's still one of my favorite recordings. You can hear everybody, all the Bud, Jake, Ray, Don Peck, Clark Brody on principal clarinet, me on bass clarinet. This is my very first recording I ever made. And
who was second clarinet? Who was second clarinet back then?
Walter Woolwich was the second clarinetist for many years. He played under Frederick Stock when he was in the our second music director, and he played under all the music directors through Schulte. He was a long time and a great teacher. He taught many Chicago clarinet players, including Mitch Estrin, our friend Mitch Estrin. So in my first year in the orchestra, we were making a lot of recordings when I first joined. We'd probably make a recording a month, or maybe at least a recording every other month. And so Larry Combs, my very, very dear friend and colleague, he showed me the ropes. And I remember in my first year in the orchestra, he was assigned to play principal in several recordings. And one of them, which I hold dear to my heart, is this. It's a compilation of Slavic overtures. It's the Moldau, it's Hungarian dances by Brahms, it's Slavonic dances by Dvorak, it's Le Prelude by Liszt. Barenboim, who was just the guest conductor in those days, would come to us and make recordings. A lot of times we wouldn't even perform these pieces. We just sight read recordings. And this was one of them. So I can tell you a really cool story about this album. They had, we'd recorded the Moldau. So I'm playing second clarinet on these. So you can hear me on the beginning of the Moldau. And in those days, I didn't have a C clarinet. Neither Larry nor I had C clarinets. So I played the second clarinet part on A clarinet.
Wow.
Wally had written it out for A clarinet. So the beginning of the Moldau, you can hear Larry and me, and I'm playing that on the A clarinet. Nowadays, I play it on C. But in any case, Barenboim had, we'd recorded Le Prelude, we'd recorded the Moldau. Then on the stand, there was the Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2. And we started recording that. And then like halfway through one of the clarinet cadenzas, he says, let's take a break. And then we go down, he said, let's take a 20-minute break. And we came back, and on the stand were the Brahms Hungarian dances. Now, just remember, we did not perform these. We did not rehearse these. Brahms Hungarian dances sitting on the stand. Liszt Hungarian Rhapsody is off the stand. So he said, we're going to just read some of these Hungarian dances. And we read through them twice, and that's what's on the recording.
Wow.
Also in my very first year of the Chicago Symphony, my only time playing second clarinet to Clark Brody.
Would you lean?
Schubert, Fourth Symphony, the Tragic Symphony.
And $5.69, that really was a long time ago.
Yeah, well, I have another copy of it. I should have brought the other copy out, which says $3.99 on sale. Yeah, right.
Tell us a little bit about Clark Brody. I know he had a high profile as a teacher. What was that? What was he like? What how would you describe his playing and teaching and personality?
Well, Clark Brody was just a gentleman. He was a beautiful colleague, a gentleman, and a fatherly figure. When I joined the orchestra, he was like a real, almost a grandfather figure. He invited me over to his house. I played stuff for him, and he was so gentle, but at the same time he was very firm. Well, this is the way it goes. Let's do Scheherazade, and make sure you take a little bit of time in this spot. And he was very meticulous at the same time as being natural. He and Joe Allard went back. They performed together in New York together in the old days, and so Clark retired during my first season. And so Larry had joined the orchestra 4 years before. And then during my first season, he was ended up playing a lot of first clarinet. So, but Clark and I played a few things together, and this is the only thing that we recorded together. It was with Giulini, who until very shortly before this recording was the principal guest conductor at the Chicago Symphony, and he brought a completely opposite like style to the Chicago Symphony than Schulte. It was like they complemented each other perfectly, you know, and you can just see the expression on Giulini's face. It's like you wanted to do well for him because you loved him. Everybody just loved him. He was just the beautiful soul, you know, beautiful Italian soul, Lorenzo.
Yeah, well, so obviously that tradition has disappeared.
No. Oh no! But we cherished every moment to play with Giulini, and this was the recording that I played with Giulini and Clark, and it's the only recorded, commercially recorded moment that we have.
Okay.
And then, so those are the two, like, maybe standouts in terms of when I was playing second clarinet.
Sure, yeah. And
they both happened in my first season. Yeah. And then, I've got some other things that I wanted to pull out when Laurie's here, but here's my first recording that I played principal on. So here's the Berlioz Symphonie Fantastique.
Wow.
With Barenboim. So the CSO has recorded Symphonie Fantastique, I think, 6 times.
Huh.
And I was on 3 of them. So it's like they recorded it in the early 70s with Schulte, and that was before I joined. That was even before Larry joined. So that was before his predecessor, Jerome Stoll was the E-flat clarinet player in Chicago at the time. And then we recorded it with Abbado in the early 80s. And so Larry was playing first and I was playing second. That's another time that I played second. And for the last movement, we switched parts. So I played E-flat. Yeah. And that was in the
and how about on this one? Did you play E-flat on this as well? Did you play?
I did. I played all the first clarinet part the way it was written. Larry said, I've played this piece so many times, I've recorded it, you play it. So I said, sure, you know, and so I'm playing, you know, first clarinet in B flat, A, C, E flat, the whole way through. So I think that's the first time I was recording on principal. And then, so there's some more things. I was just listening. This is the Firebird with Boulez. So Boulez made quite a few recordings.
Lorenzo says he used to listen to this when he was a kid.
Oh, well, I listened to it recently for the first time in decades. And I was like, wow, you know, that sounds really good. And it's like, I said, I don't even know if I could do it that way anymore. They captured it so well. And I was playing already D clarinet on here. I'd gotten a D clarinet.
Yeah,
and so, yeah, I made a couple of recordings on D clarinet. The Rite of Spring, which I'm going to talk about when Laurie comes on, and then Till Eulenspiegel. You know, we recorded a lot with Barenboim, and I played the D clarinet on Till Eulenspiegel, on this Firebird with Boulez, and you can even see it on video. There's a live performance that we did in Cologne of the Firebird with Boulez, and you can see me playing my LeBlanc D clarinet. That's my only LeBlanc. Now I have a beautiful Buffet R13 D clarinet that my friend Dave Tuttle finally sold me. It was like I coveted this instrument for decades, and he said, okay, if you really want it, I'll sell it to you. And so I was looking forward to playing it this year, because we Till Eulenspiegel was up again, but that got canceled. So but then contrabass clarinet. We're not done. Contrabass clarinet. So, I forgot to bring out the Corigliano Symphony, but here's a really interesting recording. Carter,
Partita, Barrio, and
Barrio,
yeah.
and Takamitsu. So there was a time we would go on tour with Barenboim, and we could never leave the contrabass clarinet at home. We'd always bring the contrabass clarinet on tour because he'd either program Takamitsu, or he'd program the Corigliano Symphony, or he'd program the Schoenberg 5 Pieces for Orchestra, all of which had contrabass clarinet. So we'd constantly bring the paperclip on tour.
I just
and I would play it.
Was it last year or the year before, Corigliano?
Last year.
Okay, so last season, John Corigliano came out and we did his first symphony, and John says, "Oh, who's playing the contrabass and the E flat part and so forth?" And of course, it was Lorenzo. And John said it was actually written for him, that he had struck a deal with Corigliano that please write for the contrabass under the condition that you played the E flat solo immediately afterwards, right? So I walked up to Corigliano the next day. He was doing, and I said, "Is it really true that And he goes, "Yeah, it was written for John Yeh." I said, "I just talked to him yesterday. Send him my love."
Yeah, he was our very first composer in residence. When they started the composer in residence series, we had just played the clarinet concerto. Larry had just played the Corigliano clarinet concerto with Schulte, and it was a huge success. We played it on tour all over the U.S. And I'm up in the balcony playing the antiphonal clarinet parts. And when they asked Schulte, "Who do you want as composer in residence?" it was just like fresh in his mind. Well,
Wow.
This guy Corigliano did a good job, so let's get him.
Yeah.
So they did. And then Corigliano came and was our composer in residence for several years, and he wrote this piece for us. And it was Barenboim that actually premiered it, because Schulte had so much on his plate that he said, let's move it off to next year. But Corigliano was, "No, we can't do that, because my friend Arnie, what was his name? Not Arnie. Who was the pianist's name? I'll remember it. In any case, he's dying from AIDS, and he won't be around next year." Sheldon Skolnick was a Chicago pianist, very close friend of Corigliano's. Sheldon had AIDS and attended every rehearsal, every concert, and every recording session of the first symphony. And 10 days later, after we finished the recording, he died.
Wow.
So Barenboim became a big hero to Corigliano, because he picked up the symphony and he programmed it before Sheldon died. So that was really a touching moment. Of course, the Symphony No. 1 of Corigliano is a memorial to the victims of AIDS, of the AIDS epidemic. And so, and Sheldon was the one that was the main dedicatee, because there's this offstage piano solo, Moskovsky or some parlor piece off stage.
Yeah.
And that was one of Sheldon's favorite pieces. So Corigliano, this is a very personal piece for Corigliano. So he wrote it for our orchestra, but he wrote it for Sheldon. And at that time I was sort of lobbying composers who were composing pieces for us to write for the contrabass clarinet, because I think the contrabass clarinet is a really has a lot of potential. And so we've got a lot of different pieces composed especially for our orchestra that have contrabass clarinet parts, because of my requests. And even the Carter cello concerto, which we premiered several years ago with Yo-Yo, has a section in it with the very, very low contrabass clarinet and the very, very high cello part in these it's amazing. And then this piece by Takamitsu, also recorded, written for us, which we toured in Japan on. The contrabass clarinet, another favorite of mine.
John, I mean, other than I think you can say that Corigliano is standard piece now. I mean, you know, the New York Philharmonic did it recently. We did it. It goes. Would you say that there's other pieces? I mean, I'm sure you've done hundreds of world premieres, but are there some pieces that you've participated in the world premiere other than the Crillano Symphony No. 1 that have gone on to become staples of the repertoire?
Well, yeah, actually, I would say that the Lutoslawski Third Symphony is one of that's one that we premiered with Schulte, and we worked with Lutoslawski on it, and it was and I think it's got a life of its own. And thereafter, we did the first performance of that piece, but the LA Philharmonic under Esa-Pekka Salonen did the first recording, and they are so different. You couldn't even say that they were the same piece, because there's so much chance, like time. You can make certain sections longer, certain sections shorter, and then Barenboim recorded it with us. So this is a piece that has gone on to become, I would say, part of the repertoire.
Great.
That's the one that comes to mind.
Yeah. Why don't we talk? I mean, you've mentioned little bits and bobs. Who have the music directors from the beginning been for you, and how would you sum up their effects on the orchestra, and perhaps to you personally? I'm sure Schulte, you have a lot to say about. But first list them all. Just list them all.
Okay, so Schulte hired me in 1977. Then when he retired in 1990, Daniel Barenboim became music director. And then when he left in, 2008, we went for several years, for like 4 or 5 years without a music director. We had a search going on. But to take up the interim, we had 2 amazing leaders. And one of them was our principal conductor, Bernard Haitink, who arguably did the most for the Chicago Symphony in the shortest time. He hired several key players. He was demanding in a very gentle way, and he raised the standard of performance in a very, very significant way. Pierre Boulez was our principal guest conductor, and they changed his title to resident conductor, or not resident, emeritus. He had several titles, but he was very, very significant during the period between music directors. And finally, when we found Maestro Muti, who became our music director in 2010, and still is, he just celebrated his 10th anniversary as our music director. We are fortunate to have had this succession of amazing musical leadership, music directors, guests. We had, during the time of Schulte, we also had a principal guest conductor, Claudio Abbado, who was very, very significant for us. And he was, obviously considered very, very highly for music director when Schulte retired. But all these directors had a profound influence on me and my colleagues in the orchestra, and they each put their stamp on the orchestra in a very significant way. Schulte, of course, took the orchestra that Reiner literally honed to like perfection and made it this, supernova, of gleam and power and precision, and took us on tour to Europe and Asia and Russia. It's just like he wanted really to spread the word, and he had such incredible energy. So that energy was very infectious to the orchestra. We had incredible spirit and energy, and won a lot of fans that way. And then when he decided to step down and become music director laureate, there was a search, and Daniel Barenboim almost complete opposite, because during the time when Schulte was music director, Barenboim would come in as a regular guest conductor. But then when he became music director in Paris, he wouldn't come anymore. And when we had Abato as principal guest conductor. Barenboim had other stuff to do. You know, he had Bayreuth, and he was very, very busy in Europe. Rarely came to America. And so then when we got him as music director, he was a completely different, he was changed as a conductor. In the days when, you know, my first year in the orchestra, he would come in and sight read recordings, you know. He was so like precision clear, you know, and a lot of that I think he got from Schulte. But when he came in as our music director, he had a different modus operandi. I think, you know, this tells a lot. We played in Royal Albert Hall in London, a tour in, I think it was 1984. And we played Bruckner 7. And after the concert, Daniel Barenboim comes backstage wheeling Jacqueline Dupre, who was in a wheelchair at the time, you know, incapacitated with multiple sclerosis. And Daniel comes wheeling her in with his head held up high, and he goes, "Oh, gentlemen," you know, it was mostly, he was like wheeling past the men's locker room. "You know, we're going to do this piece next year," meaning Bruckner 7. He says, "You won't recognize it." It was just like almost in a perverse way. He was saying, "I'm going to make you guys different from what Schulte made you." And it was like almost, it was just like this premonition. And then when he came in, it was like all about fantasy and color and about dynamics, you know, a huge piano dynamic spectrum, you know. And it was like he would deliberately not show us beats, and it would it would frustrate a lot of musicians. And a lot of people, I would hear grumbling from behind me. It's like, "Where's the beat?" You know, it's like, so this would be the beat with Barenboim.
Right.
And he would expect every member of the orchestra to lead and to be the workings. He didn't want to be the leader. He wanted us to be the leader, and he would just be the sculptor and the shaper, you know. That was his MO when he joined as music director. And it really threw a lot of people for a loop, I have to say. He made a lot of well, he had his friends in the orchestra, but he also made a lot of enemies, made a lot of detractors. But you know, for all of that, we saw him recently, a couple of seasons ago, and I knew a lot of people refused to play for him, but we did the entire. I mean, they took the week off. Let's put it that way. But,
no, I understand.
We did, but a lot of people were just. I was one of them that was delighted. It was like, wow, Barenboim's coming back after 12 years. You know, he hadn't been with us in 12 years, and so we played Mavlas, and that was one of the most memorable moments. First of all, because Teresa, my wife, was playing second clarinet, and there are a lot of great duets in Mavlas. You know,
it's Teresa right there, I hope.
Teresa,
bring her over to say hello one more time. Yeah.
There's Teresa, but here she comes in person. Hi, sweetheart. So she can you know, attest to experiencing Barenboim when he on his return to the Chicago Symphony. It was a really, really special time when we did Mavlas. First of all, Mavlas, you know, by Smetana is rarely performed in its whole, you know, all 6 tone poems at once. And we got to do it, and we discovered so many and Barenboim was like true to himself, you know, very, very free, and conducted the whole thing without looking at the score. And it was like expected us to show all the entrances and just, but he had really, really specific ideas.
It was a shock to the new members. I remember that. So that was an interesting thing to have played once or twice, you know, when he was music director, and then, you know.
And when he came back, you know, because
I was the one that was shocked, and then
well, there were about, I think the orchestra was about 75% different between Barenboim's last appearance as music director and his return a couple of years ago. It was November of 2018, wasn't it?
Maybe.
Teresa's gonna fix my hair and makeup.
Oh.
She's looking at me like.
So John, I heard you mention in another interview, like the Soviet Union, what it was like touring the Soviet Union. I mean, you've been on, I can't even imagine how many tours, 43 years with the Chicago Symphony. Is there one or two, I mean, could be just the place, or particularly the place, that just really sticks out as wow, this was like a life-changing tour, a life-changing place to visit, something like that?
Well, there have been several, of course. You know, my first tour of anywhere was to Europe in 1978, and that was, you know, I got to we were in Salzburg for almost a whole week, and that was the first stop. Oh, sure. And then and that was when I got to meet, because all three orchestras were in Salzburg at the same time: the Berlin Philharmonic, the Vienna Philharmonic, and the Chicago Symphony. So I got to hang out with all these guys, like, you know, Karl Leister and Peter Schmidl. And at that time, that was Ernest Ottensommer's first year in the Vienna Philharmonic. So he was the rookie, he was a newbie, and I was a newbie in the CSO. So we kind of bonded, and you know, now his sons are in the Vienna Philharmonic and the Berlin Philharmonic, you know, Daniel and Andreas. And so that is a, you know, that was a significant experience. My first time in Paris, my first time in London, my first time in Lucerne, you know, and I figured, gosh, you know, is there a more beautiful place on earth than Lucerne, Switzerland? And it was like, and is there a more exciting place on earth than London, you know? And so that was really, really, but then we take tours to Europe like practically every other year, you know? So all these places, my first time in Berlin, when the wall was still up, you know, going through Checkpoint Charlie, that was a significant tour for me in 1978. The next one was 1986, my first tour to Asia, my first time in China ever, you know, my first time in Japan, my first time in Hong Kong, like I told you, you know, landing into the city of Hong Kong and you know, just playing in these amazing Orient and visiting my roots, you know. I went and visited China on a day trip for the first time, went through Macau, went through Guangzhou.
John, sorry to interrupt. You know what, I thought we still have a lot to talk about, but and we will get back to that, but we want to invite our guest of honor for J Lawrie Bloom to join us for a little bit.
Hey, Lawrie.
He'll be on.
Come on in. I got some stuff for you.
So
here's the
Lawrie.
Don't get the bell.
Where is he? I'm playing
You
all
can
our
see
favorite
what a good
tunes.
influence I've had on
Oh,
John.
there he is.
Okay.
Hi, Lawrie.
First of all, welcome to Lawrie Bloom. Lawrie Bloom just finished his 40th year with the Chicago Symphony, and he just retired. Hi, there's Teresa. Hello. And you know, he had some people would say an unfortunate, I mean, this whole thing is kind of messy, and he had no idea how he would be going out. But, you know, I have to ask you, were you born on a Sunday, Lawrie?
I have no idea.
My mother says I'm so lucky because I was born on a Sunday. The truth of the matter is, Laurie's last concert with the Chicago Symphony was playing a bass clarinet concerto. I mean, it was one of the highlights, I guess, of his career. He unfortunately didn't know it was the last concert, but how fortunate. Imagine if the virus and all that had taken place a couple of weeks earlier. You know. how wonderful.
Trust me, I was paying attention, even though I didn't know it was going to be the end.
Yeah. But no, but congratulations on I mean, 40 years is fantastic. We just want to ask you a couple of questions. First of all, I need to bring something up. Lorenzo, come here, which I think is a fascinating fact. Okay, so we have.
Hi, Lorenzo.
So we have. First of all, do you understand how lucky I am? I mean, all of us. We're literally in the presence of three of the great bass clarinetists of the world right now. Okay. So, I mean, it's, you know, lucky me, you know, but anyway, it needs to be said, Lawrie played bass clarinet with the Chicago Symphony. Lorenzo plays bass clarinet with the Hong Kong Philharmonic. John Yeh played bass clarinet with the Chicago Symphony before Lawrie, and John Yeh played bass clarinet with the Hong Kong Philharmonic before Lorenzo. Okay, and what I find another fascinating fact is that Lawrie sat next to his predecessor for 40 years, and the whole time John Yeh sat next to his predecessor, Larry Combs, who was E-flat and assistant the whole time. I can't think of any example like that. The closest kind of oddity I can think of would probably be the Boston Symphony, where every member has been the second clarinet. You know, the principal, the assistant principal, several seconds, I guess, and you could say Craig Nordstrom played second. So I think that's a kind of odd one, but I think you guys are a little bit odd too. So anyway, we really wanted to pay
odd.
Yeah, we wanted to pay a tribute to Lawrie and his remarkable career. And so why don't we? What I want to ask you is, Lawrie, if you had to pick one favorite recording of your bass clarinet playing over 40 years with the Chicago Symphony that you'd want us to go out and say, this is really me at my best in the orchestra, could you name one?
Wow.
I'm silent.
I never
I
ask
have
these questions.
Well, I don't listen to myself a lot that way. I'm told our Bernstein Shostakovich 7 is pretty good.
There,
One
wow.
of the all-time great CSO recordings.
Yeah.
Wow. Great. And so before the Chicago Symphony, you were playing in Arizona, in Phoenix, is that right?
I was with Phoenix, then I played with Lyric Opera in Chicago, then Vancouver Symphony in British Columbia, and then Cincinnati.
Whoa.
But all in 5 years.
Wow.
I mean,
Wow.
I left Phoenix in 1976. That was my first orchestra. I joined Chicago in 1980, and that was my 5th orchestra.
Wow. Wow.
My dad thought it was hysterically funny to tell everyone, my son just can't seem to keep a job.
Yeah. In your case, it's a nice problem to have.
Well, you kept it for a long time, the last one.
Yeah.
But not long enough.
I had to prove him wrong.
Well, so his last performance, Lawrie premiered, I guess, a commission with orchestra. Who wrote that, and what was that like?
Nicolas Bacri, from originally from Paris. He lives in Belgium right now. I had played music of Nicolas's before, chamber music, and when Muti offered me this commission, you couldn't really turn that down. And we compiled a group of scores from 5 different composers and gave them to Muti, and he picked my number 1 pick and my least favorite. And I said, good, we'll go with Nicolas. And so that's how that came about. I didn't know Nicolas personally at the time, but the orchestra had a tour a year before the performance, and I wasn't needed, which does not happen often. I think there were 2 tours that didn't have bass clarinet in my 40 years. So I flew to Paris to meet Nicholas and played for him quite a bit, and we sat and talked, and he had been to Belgium that year and heard a lot of bass clarinet playing, and he wasn't sure he wanted to write for the bass clarinet. So, but somehow
you proved him wrong. You convinced them. And we heard it was just spectacular. It was just an amazing thing, and just to be able to hear you in the orchestra with Muti, it was very, very special. Great send off.
So how many concerts did you do of it?
4 performances.
Wow, man, great. And you played solos with the symphony before?
Yeah, that was my 3rd time.
What were the other 2 pieces?
First, I played the Ian Krauss Concerto for bass clarinet and large orchestra. Very large orchestra. That was a fun piece. And then I played the wonderful Thea Musgrave Autumn Sonata. And John played the offstage bass clarinet and blew me away.
I had to project from off stage.
Shame on you, John. How can you do such a thing?
Lawrie was the star of the show all the time, believe me.
So I just a couple more things. I want to ask John 2 questions. One, what's your favorite recording of his playing? Is it the Shostakovich, or did something stick out? Or actually, is it even a concert? If that is there a moment with all Laurie's great playing over 40 years that really actually was memorable?
Oh, well, there's a lot. I mean, to say to say one is difficult, but Lawrie already mentioned the Bernstein. This is one of the all-time great recordings of the Chicago Symphony, period.
Wow.
And the fact that Lawrie had a huge part in it, a huge solo in it, is very, very special. So everybody should know this one. But then there's the Stravinsky's. We recorded the Rite of Spring with Barenboim, and that's here. This is an interesting recording, but you can also see the Rite of Spring in a live performance from Cologne on I think you can get it on YouTube, and that's one of my all-time most anytime we play the Rite of Spring obviously is fun. And so you and I have played it together, Andy.
Yes.
Lawrie and I have played it together numerous times, and every time it's a special occasion. And so we always have
the
great
first
fun.
piece I ever played in the Chicago Symphony.
No kidding.
Right.
Wow.
I wasn't even in yet. I mean, I had been offered the job, and Schulte asked me could I come play Rite of Spring and go to Carnegie Hall, and Cincinnati was able to accommodate me for that. I came in and played it. And I was looking at the season that isn't right now, and
Yes.
I was kind of hoping to come back and play Rite of Spring as a bookend.
Oh.
Right, exactly.
Well, yeah. I have a feeling the Rite of Spring will be performed again someday, and it's not good. So hopefully they'll have the right guy. So,
well, we did, we did so many Strauss tone poems. So there's Don Quixote, and there's Ein Heldenleben. We recorded Ein Heldenleben twice. Once with Barenboim and once with Haitink. And so, yeah, you can hear Lawrie to great advantage in many of those. And Mahler 6 with Haitink, it's just
some of the Bartok stuff we did with Schulte.
Right.
I think we recorded the Dance Suite.
That's right. Dance Suite early on.
There's some great bass clarinet writing in Bartok.
Fantastic.
Yep.
So everybody, 40 years distinguished career, you can still hear him with the Chicago Symphony.
But here's something that I want to show that Lawrie and I, it's the Chicago Symphony wins a Grammy Award nominated music for basset horns.
Wow.
by Mozart. And there's who's the top dog there?
Who is that young guy?
Beautiful. Wow.
There he is.
So, John, you know what I hate about you? You're never prepared for these interviews. You don't have these things ready to go, you know?
Oh, I pulled them off the shelf. I mean, I had to dig for them because
I know.
they're all,
I
all
warned
my
you.
stacks.
So, John, tell us a G-rated funny story about, there's got to be at least one funny story in 40 years.
Yeah, okay, so here's the one. Here is the one. And Lori, did you read the tribute I put for you on the CSO members Facebook? Because I should send it to you if you didn't see it, because I didn't see it, but I sent it to them, but it's about Left Hand Day.
Ah, Left Hand Day, an extremely important exercise in mental agility.
Exactly. So in the old days, we used to do doubling in the woodwind section. And so that meant you'd have 2 clarinets and then 2 assistant clarinets. And so Lori and I would always be assisting Larry and Greg. And so we would be playing things like Beethoven's 3rd and Beethoven's 5th and Beethoven's 7th. And we discovered one day that in Beethoven's 7th, in the last movement, we could do Left Hand Day. Almost, I mean, basically for the entire last movement. And so instead of, you know, we go. Well, I have to get situated. I haven't practiced left hand. And even, oh shoot, it doesn't. Even the hard parts.
John, you have tenure in the orchestra, right?
You didn't play Yamaha.
Thank goodness.
The Yamaha is not as good a left-handed instrument.
But by the way,
too much stuff in the way here.
John, Alan Reed writes, I saw that. It was hilarious.
Okay. Well, so it's like it kept us awake during a piece where, you know, we could have been playing it in our sleep. And it definitely, like Lori said, required a certain amount of mental and digital dexterity. And so that was the thing. And we figured this is our internal inside joke that is only for the 2 of us. But I got an email the next morning from somebody that was in the audience. And he said, I really enjoyed your Beethoven 7 last night. Orchestra sounded fantastic. But weren't you and Mr. Bloom playing with the wrong hand on top? And he said, don't think people didn't notice, because I noticed it from the first balcony.
And I ran into the head librarian at music librarian at Northwestern, and he looked at me and said, having a little trouble remembering which hand goes on top.
Yeah. You want your money back from your teachers. In fact, Lori, who were your teachers?
Well, where do I start? I worked with 4 different people mainly, all of whom studied with Bonnard, which I didn't know till later. I began with a guy named Al Clearfield, who Dick Cantor, our old second oboe, handed me a picture. He was always cutting articles out of newspapers and handing them around in the orchestra, and he handed back this picture. When I knew Al Clearfield, he was a clarinetist in the Washington Redskins pep band.
Huh.
And the picture that Dick gave me was from the Curtis newsletter.
Huh.
And it was the class of 1937 clarinets with Daniel Bonnard, all of them, and Al Clearfield was in it. And I made a move from my dad moved us from Maryland to New Jersey, and my grandmother was a church organist, and she went to an American Guild of Organists conference in Philadelphia, and the Philadelphia Woodwind Quintet played, and my little 5 foot nothing grandmother from Scotland went marching right up to Gigliotti and said, my grandson is moving to New Jersey. Who should he study with? and he said, Roger McKinney.
Oh.
So we got there, we contacted McKinney, and I studied with him from 7th grade until college. And then he said, now I want you to go to Gigliotti. And so I went to Gigliotti, and then I did work a little bit with Marcellus while I was with the opera company. So it was good because everybody had come from the same school. It was not confusing, giving me different ideas that were totally different.
Great.
It took me to confuse him. Yeah, I was giving you all sorts of really confusing ideas.
John has always confused me.
So, Lawrie, is there any recording or something in particular that after 40 years with John that, besides all his great playing, that really stuck out? Some moment that you can think of.
There's a lot of things. John played the Nielsen Concerto with us many years ago. I don't think there's a commercial recording of it. I think you had 5 performances.
Yeah.
I mean, of us with your recording of the Nielsen is not with the CSO though.
Yeah, I have 2 recordings of the Nielsen. Both of them were issued. The first one was in 1986 with the Chicago Chamber Orchestra with Dieter Kober. So,
Right,
and then when we did it in 1993 with Naomi Yarvi, the CSO issued it on a compilation of CSO soloists. So they had Larry's recording of the Debussy Rhapsody. They had Bud Herseth's recording of the Hummel. They had, I guess it was a harp concerto with. They had. It was a bunch of recordings.
You gave me that. I think I have.
Yeah. It was it was an in-house release. It was when they were doing these CDs for the radio marathon. They would issue one a year. They'd have one about Levine and one about Boulez and one about Frederick Stock. This was one with soloists in the orchestra.
Yeah.
And
we're trying to convince Muti to do that and put the Bakri on it and Jennifer Higdon.
Well, there are a few CSO recently with Muti, like the Hindemith violin concerto with Robert Chen and the Ibert flute concerto with all these. They should be released soloists because they're world-class performances.
I just said the wrong. But Jen Gunn just soloed with us. Eugene Picorni soloing is scheduled to solo. So it would be very possible.
Great.
So we'll see. But I have to say, orchestrally, John is Till Eulenspiegel.
That is so true. I love it.
No, I'm serious. Yeah, every time I hear an orchestra play that piece, everybody plays. No, but everybody plays that E flat solo safely because it's dangerous.
Yeah.
John, I mean, it's what I love about the Chicago Symphony. People take risks, and John takes big risks on that piece.
Did I hear you play that in Avery Fisher Hall a million years ago? Is that possible?
Yes, it is very possible.
I remember just the way he takes his solo bow is memorable. He's like, I know I've really done something, and I'm in Carnegie Hall, and yes, I'll take my bow.
Hey, we have this saying. I had it posted in my locker for many years that says, "Is this much onstage fun really legal?"
Legal.
That just pretty much says it about the fun that Lawrie and I had for 40 years.
So Lawrie, do you have a funny story other than the left-handed thing about John? It can be very embarrassing. Don't worry, it just has to be G-rated.
Do you want it musical or social?
Well, both. We're honoring both of you right now, so both. Yes.
Okay.
Bring it on.
Musically, one extremely memorable moment for me. We used to play Mahler one. It seemed like every year, both downtown and at Ravinia. And some of you may know, John knows where this is going. Some of you may know that there's a train that goes by right next to the Ravinia. In fact, it separates the Ravinia grounds from one of their parking lots. And it only seems to go by during very quiet spots that we're playing. And
notably the alto flute train duo in Daphnis and Chloe.
Yeah, that's a particular favorite.
Duet. Yeah.
So we're playing the third movement, and we hear the train coming. And John is about to get to pop, ba-da, pop, pop. Yeah. And I think he just decided, I'm going to be heard even over the train.
That was never an option. That was never an option. He was going to get drowned out.
That first note, that squeak brought Snowed out. I've done some really great squeaks on the bass clarinet, but that was the greatest squeak I've ever heard.
Squeak big. Andy's got
well, John and I have also a little embarrassing thing, and he's not going to remember this, but in 2013, he came over when he was doing the right, and we were playing recordings and stuff for each other, and I guess I did a gliss and something. He goes, all of a sudden his face dropped. He goes, "You did that gliss pretty well," and he goes, "I got to tell you, I did Rhapsody in Blue." You're right, and he exploded. Okay, and just while he's talking about, I get a tightness in my stomach because I've had an even worse experience. It was like in the parks and everyone stand up and it was on the jumbotron, and I'm like, yes, this is great. And all of a sudden, I just blew up. So we've made an agreement that our last retirement year, we're gonna play it on the A clarinet, and the whole orchestra is going to sound wrong when they come in. We're going to get our revenge.
Oh, that was the last thing we rehearsed before the shutdown at Orchestra Hall, the Rhapsody in Blue.
I never got my chance before I retired. John and I had a plan that in Tchaikovsky 4,
second clarinet cadenza in the last movement.
Great. Wait, okay, so that was the musical. Did he say the social one?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
No, he hasn't said.
What's the social one? Social.
Years ago, we were in Vienna.
Yeah.
And they have the Hörigers, is it called? The wine school.
Oh, yeah. Yes.
And we had a fantastic party in one.
Amazing.
And all this food, I mean, it was incredible. And this beautiful woman who was in a dirndl and I thought she was a waitress. And then she started to sing and she sang like a high E flat. And I was like, wait a minute. It was Lucia Pop. But
it was Lucia Pop.
At one moment, we were in line for this fantastic buffet, and many of you may know John's appetite is legendary. and they happened to have run out of plates for a moment, and we were just waiting for them. He may or may not remember where this one's going.
No.
Yeah, we're waiting for somebody to bring some plates. And there's a platter the size of 2 plates that happened to be empty. So
Hey.
John picked up the platter and just piled it with food. But
Sounds like
guarantee
something
you,
I do.
He ate it all.
Yeah.
I love it.
We were pretty young when we joined.
I remember the party. I remember Lucia Pop. She was beautiful. And Yeah, but the platter, that sounds I can visualize it now.
Okay, so we're gonna we're gonna finish Laurie's thing with, we're gonna introduce our bass clarinetist to ask a question. So he'll.
Oh, there's Lorenzo.
Hey, Lorenzo.
Finally.
Yay! The hot seat.
Now I can get down to the right clef.
Yes. Okay. No, just.
By the way, if one day you see him sitting in the principal chair, I'm gonna blame you guys. This was the beginning.
Just a little question to you, Lawrie. What's your favorite piece that you have played with the bass clarinet in a symphonic repertoire and opera?
Symphonic, it's a toss-up between Prokofiev 5, which is one of the greatest bass clarinet parts ever written, and Don Quixote, which is the most exposed orchestral bass clarinet part ever written.
Absolutely.
Opera, it's hands down Tristan Act 2.
Beautiful, beautiful.
So I never expected as an orchestral player to get to play that, and we did it twice, just Act 2 with Barenboim, once the complete, and once the Act 2 with Espeka.
Yeah, it seems to be very common now to do second act of Tristan, and also Valkyrie, first act, actually. Yeah.
Oh, we've done that, yeah.
Great, because I love Prokofiev 5, of course, and actually all the symphonies of Prokofiev.
So fun.
In fact, when I came to Chicago with the London Symphony, with the Gergiev 2009, and I played actually Prokofiev 6.
Yeah.
Oh.
You got this job basically on Prokofiev 5.
And I got,
on
and
tour.
after I played Prokofiev 5 with Jaap Masveden in here on computer.
And that Europe tour.
Yes.
So what are your favorite pieces?
So yeah, my favorite
Yes.
now is Shostakovich 7. In fact, I will go to listen the
Oh, you've got it. You've
Bernstein.
got it.
Yes.
Bernstein.
And opera, definitely Valkyrie, because I played many times, and
You played it.
I just love the solo of that. But Tristan is always actually my first Wagner opera I played, and it's an unbelievable solo. So it's beautiful. So great. You can come back, but just for 10 minutes.
Don't get so comfortable,
no,
man.
don't talk too much. Okay.
That's not going to happen. I love
Lawrie, are you sure you want to retire? We need someone over here, man, who knows how to treat his colleagues with a little more respect. But anyway, Lawrie, thank you so much. You're in Oregon now, is that right?
I am. I live in Bend, Oregon.
Well, and how's that going so far? It hasn't been too long, but
It's great. We've almost found the house from all the stuff we moved here.
Wonderful.
We're not totally unpacked.
Yeah, well, that'll probably be a long process. So, congratulations on on a tremendous career. I had no idea you had 5 jobs before the CSO in 5 years. 4 jobs. Yeah, I mean that's tremendous, and and we wish you well in Oregon. And too bad about the the virus, but it's so amazing that you got to play the concerto and really go out and full
That was
glory.
very special.
Yeah.
And we got to celebrate afterwards. We had a nice party.
Great. Congratulations, and thanks so much for joining us. It was really
You bet.
great.
Thanks, guys. Great to see you. Andy,
Great to see
John,
you.
I miss you, buddy.
Miss you too. Miss you too. You better come back. When we do the Gran Partita, you better come back.
Uh-huh. Good.
We'll see how that goes.
Okay.
Right.
All righty. Bye-bye, guys.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Great. So everyone's been really patient. I mean, we're at the 2-hour mark, and I knew this was going to happen.
Hours? Have we already been on for 2 hours? Oh my God!
Yeah,
I know. Only 1
And I
hour.
have. So anyway, there's going to be new people joining us, and we totally understand. But I can't just let you go because there's still a few more things I wanted to find out about you. Let's talk about. First of all, you played double lip. Like, how did that all happen?
So it was during the summer of 1974, my second summer at Aspen, that my roommate at the time, Ron Singer, if Mike Drafton's listening, our former boy, Ron, he said, I was just at a lesson with Gary Gray, and he asked me if I could, if he could try my mouthpiece. He said, don't worry, I won't put any teeth marks on it. I play double lip. And I said, what? Gary Gray plays double lip? I've been studying with Gary for like 5 years, and I had no idea because he never mentioned it. And I said, you know, other players that I really like play double lip, like Harold Wright, I knew played double lip, and Dick Stoltzman played double lip. And I said, if my teacher, Gary Gray, plays double lip, and Harold Wright and Dick Stoltzman, I better try it. And so that summer I made a project of learning double lip, and I did it, and I never looked back. It was the first thing I played it on was a Mozart C minor serenade, and I almost didn't make it through the concert because I was still developing my musculature at the time, but I did it. And
you had to learn how to stand up and play it.
Right, and then Teresa reminds me that I did everything sitting down. I even performed a concerto. I even won a concerto competition playing the Weber Concertino sitting down. And then somebody came up to me in the audience. It wasn't just somebody, it was the sister of Ralph and Harold Gomberg. She goes, why are you playing a concerto sitting down? That looks terrible. And she was very outspoken. And I said, oh, well, you know, my teacher sits down. And she goes, if you're a soloist, you have to stand up, unless it's like Perlman. And so I said, okay. And that year I was studying the Nielsen Concerto because I was going to go back and play it with Meili Mehta and the American Youth Symphony. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take what Mrs. Gomberg said. I'm going to practice. So I had to like practice every day, long tones, standing up. And gradually I built up my musculature and my embouchure and my strength. And now it's a habit now. I play all the instruments, you know, E flat, D, bass, contrabass, regular clarinet, play it all on a double lip. And it's just a natural way. I've gotten used to it. And it gives a lot of flexibility, a lot of sensitivity. You can't bite because it hurts, and you get a lot more like fine adjustment possibilities with double lip.
Wow. And for those of you that don't know, there was a family, the Gombergs, they like 5 oboe siblings or something. They all went to Curtis, and Ralph was principal in the Boston Symphony, and Harold was the principal of the New York Phil. I mean, quite a special family. So, you know, just for the youngsters out there.
I had to take her advice seriously. So anyway, I practiced with the mouthpiece alone. And if it's the right pressure, you're not closing the reed at all. If the pitch goes too high, that means you're closing the reed. So you should always play a concert C, and then you can practice the flexibility by bending the sound down. And always returning to that pitch. So it's a good diagnostic tool. If you got a student that's biting, you always make them play a concert C on the mouthpiece alone, because invariably it'll be higher. It'll be C sharp or D. And that means that they've got the reed closed too much. You want always the reed to be wide open and focus the air in a beam at the reed. That's, you know, the way I've developed my sound concept. You get maximum resonance when you're not mashing the reed close.
Great. He demonstrated that in masterclass. I was going to ask him about that. But okay, maybe my math is wrong, but you only really realized this see this see thing 5-6 years ago, or it wasn't something that you were doing all along. He was so excited. He came to Hong Kong before masterclass. He goes, I figured out a way to figure out if I'm biting or not. You have to hit a C, and then you're okay. If it goes higher, then it's terrific. I'm so glad. So everyone, write that down when you're reading, listening.
If it's too low, it generally means that your air is not focused in a beam. It means that your air is diffuse, and that only works for the French clarinet. If you have the German clarinet is much more forgiving in that it focuses the air much better for you. In the French clarinet, you have to do all the focusing yourself in the mouth.
Now there was a time when you guys meaning the section, played German stuff on German instruments, right? On Wurlitzers.
True, that's
really
true.
Unusual. Everyone picks up the German thing to do a Beethoven symphony or Bruckner symphony.
Well, the only guy that wasn't on board with that was Lawrie, but Larry and Greg and I all learned the German system for certain repertoire. Wow. And actually I've made two solo recordings using the Euler System. I have a set of Yamahas that are beautiful, that they're almost identical to the Wurlitzers that I've played. And so I recorded the Hindemith Sonata and the Reger B-flat Sonata, the third of Reger, on that instrument. So it gives a different kind of sensibility, a different kind of phrasing, a different kind of, longer line of phrasing is available. And you trade a little bit of coloristic variety for this phrasing possibility. So I'm going to do my third wardrobe change. So this is something that my son-in-law John Swick gave me. It's
very good. You're the most, Wolfie.
You're the most, Wolfie.
Toddler. Oh yeah, Mozart's clarinet. Toddler. Very nice.
And then on the back it says,
on the contrary, it is you who is the most. And then look down, Mozart. Very good.
This was my Christmas present for my son-in-law, John Swick. So I'm going to do my
By the way, we have a fifth former guest, Michelle Zukowski, who's woken up from the West Coast. And, she's written down your C thing. She's trying to do more teaching, so
awesome.
Written it down. This is.
I don't know if that works. It might work on the. I didn't try it on the German clarinet, but maybe it'll work also. But the main thing is to keep the reed open so that you don't lose any resonance. Michelle, I love you. That's so awesome. I'm learning the John Williams Clarinet Concerto, which was written for her, right. and I'm so grateful that she had all the materials. So I love the piece. I'm going to play it.
Beautiful.
That's what I'm spending my quarantine learning.
Do you actually have it lined up and like an engagement to perform?
No, I just learned it. So I'm telling people that I know it so that if they want to have that piece, then I can play it. Great. So I'm just like gradually getting the information out that if we ever get back to performing on stage, that'll be a piece that I can play.
Yeah, very good. That's an excellent. That's a great example. I mean, that's my second thing. I mean, I love all these shout outs to the old people, but the other thing is people that are actually being extra productive, you can say, during this, that they're literally ready. And especially for young people, I think this, and even the people with jobs and so forth, to work on your game so you can unleash, when things get back, and hopefully just unleash the best self you have. Let the audience understand why we're important and really show our best selves in the best shape. And now you're learning interesting repertoire. And so I hope that's a really great example.
I've been learning these pieces that were written, yes. The etudes by Jim Stevenson. Jim Stevenson and I have had a real productive working relationship because he's created several new pieces. I even have a new album called Liquid Melancholy of his 74 minutes of his clarinet music, including his concerto and his sonata, was written for me, and a bunch of chamber music. And Teresa and I have been working on his Yetu duets. So you can see some of those probably on my Facebook.
I've seen them.
page.
I've seen them. Very nice work. Yeah. Hey, actually, so just a few little questions I had that I missed when we were going up. I'm curious, who were some of the clarinet students at Juilliard when you were there? Was Mitch Estrin there? Actually, you mentioned
He sure was.
the
Mitch
president
and
of the
I-
ICA, of course.
Yeah,
Okay,
the current president of the ICA,
Yeah.
very good friend and good colleague. He and I were at school at exactly the same time at Juilliard. David Smyers was another student. He moved to Germany. He was very interested in all styles of clarinet playing. A very open-minded individual. Let's see, who else? You know, Lori Singer, the actress, was at school when she was a cello major when I was there, and she knew my cousin Marianne Chen very well, who's a cello teacher in Parma in Italy. And let's see, who else was the clarinets? There was Ted Lane and Thomas Aber, who moved to the Netherlands, but those guys I hadn't seen in decades, and I saw them in Belgium at the clarinet conference in 2018, a couple of years ago. So I caught up with Tom and Ted Lane, and you know, those guys. Tom studied with a bass clarinet with Joe Allard also.
And anyone interested, obviously Stanley Drucker, one of our ex-guests, Ted has a very nice Facebook page. That was his teacher as a tribute to him. So if you're curious about anything Stanley Drucker, go on to Ted's page.
And Mitch Estrin has written a book, a biography of Stanley Drucker, which is a must. This is something that everybody should read. Mitch Estrin's recently published biography of Stanley Drucker. Stanley is, you know, literally the model that we all aspire to, because he's had the longest longevity. You know, Michelle gave him a good run for your money. But Stan's the man, you know.
Yeah.
Just
how about you? You think you'll make it to 80?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, playing till 80. No signs of. I don't see any signs of slowing down. So.
Well, you know what? I've never taken a sabbatical before, and this has become sort of like my sabbatical since March. And at first, it was like, oh my gosh, we'd been working so hard. We just came back from a European tour. I came back with this cough, and I had I could not kick this cough for 8 weeks, and I think I had the virus. I had COVID, but I'd never been sick for that long. I coughed and coughed and coughed, and it was like, it turned out I had pneumonia. And then we went on, I sort of got better, and we went on tour to Florida. Then we came back, and I went on a concert, a recital tour in North Dakota, and I was on my daughter Molly's show. And then we were just barely made it back to Chicago and started rehearsing for this one week. And then they closed down, and it was like, we'd rehearsed, you know, what was it? It was a Ravel and Gershwin program. So we rehearsed Rhapsody in Blue, and we rehearsed, like, I guess it was Daphnis. And then they called us up. They sent us an email 5 p.m. saying, the concert tonight is canceled. And it was like, what? You know, a smile creeps across my face, and said, we've been working so hard, and I don't have to go in on a Thursday night. And then they said, hang on for further developments. And it was like, okay, all the concerts this week are canceled. And I said, oh my gosh, a Friday off and a Saturday night off? This is like unheard of, to have a Saturday night off. And then it was like, oh my gosh, you know, I can relax. And then it was like, the next week was canceled. And then they canceled a whole month. And it was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And I've been teaching all my students online. I started teaching on Facebook and Skype, and I said, hey, you know, I could get used to this. And then I said, what am I going to do with my days where I don't have to go to the hall and rehearse? I'm going to pull down my music that I have had sitting around, like the Williams Concerto and my Yetudes that, you know, Jim composed, you know, almost 2 years ago. I haven't even played, I've only performed one of them, and there are 12 of them. So I'm going to learn them, and they're hard. So I've been spending time, and, you know, Teresa's been doing some composing. So we've been playing some duets together, and it's just been a new reality. And I've been able to sit back and listen to, you know, your performances. And Nicholas, I mean, it's just like astounding what you can do on your own, you know, with amazing repertoire, and make it so engaging and so perfect. I'm just like astounded. My screen time has exploded over the last 5 months, but I've learned so much, and I'm just gotten so much pleasure from listening to my colleagues far-flung all over the world. And Andy, I mean, you know, listening to the Mio Suite in all different places of Hong Kong, it's just like, was so nostalgic. I wanted to go visit, you know, and sit on the veranda of the ladies racket club. And you know, it's just like, take the Star Ferry, and it's just like all these things, all the memories and all the experiences came just flooding back to me. So, and I've had great time to spend with my family. I mean, you know, we literally have not been in the company of anybody else in person for 5 months, but you know, we're lucky to have our health and our safety. And
are you playing? I mean, you're in your 60s. You've been playing 43 years just in the orchestra. Are you playing as well as you've ever played?
You know what? I guess so. I mean, you know, when I listen to recordings, though, it's like I pulled out this recording of the Firebird that we did with Boulez, and I said, I don't know if I can do that anymore at that level, but I think I can do other things better. So, you know, like maybe just having the experiences, having the life experiences, I can bring more to the repertoire that either I haven't learned before, or that I can revisit. And, you know, you can always, you know, I'm always working on upping the level, and it doesn't become any easier. In fact, it becomes harder, because I think my standard and my demands have gone up, and I learn every day from my students, you know, what they do and what they do right and what they do wrong just focuses me on what I have to do constantly. And so the standard is constantly going up. And that was the one thing that Schulte would always give us a pep talk on. He said, my dears, we must maintain our standard. And he said, and we must raise our standard. And this is the hardest thing. This is the most difficult thing, but we must raise our standard. And he would challenge us every year, because after being away from us, you know, for the summer, or for a while, several months, he'd come back to us and just kind of give a overview of what he'd done. And he said, my dears, I conducted in New York. They invited me and I conducted them. He says, they are good, but we are better. And then the next year he came back and he said, my dears, I conducted in Berlin. They are as good as we are. We must raise our standard. And so he'd compare his experiences with Boston. He says, I conducted in Boston, my dear. They are good, but we are better. And then he said, Berlin, you know, they give us a run for our money. So it's like, this was sort of like something that was a pep talk that he'd give every time he'd come back to us. And that's always stayed with me. So I owe my career to Sir George Schulte. I literally owe my career to him, because, you know, when I was 19 auditioning, you know, it was like he gave me a chance.
Yeah, but I can't. Honestly, people like you and Michelle and Drucker and Paul May or whatever. I mean, to win, how old were you when you got your first job?
2020.
Oh, he was 20. He was an old guy. But no, you won at 19. But I can't get my head around people as teenagers. I mean, I couldn't tie my shoelaces when I was 19. I just can't. And you especially, you were pre-med a year before that. So you went to conservatory basically. I mean, you had no experience basically in it. Well, I can't say that. I mean, you did youth orchestras in Aspen, all that. But you were in Juilliard. You didn't even finish the year when you won that job, right? I mean,
2 years. I started college when I was 15 because I graduated early from high school, and I was always early. So I went to UCLA when I was 15, and then at that point I went and took all these science classes, and so when I entered Juilliard, I had sort of like caught up with everybody else in age. So I entered Juilliard as a freshman after having already 2 years of college. Right. So I was sort of on the same track, but after 2 years of Juilliard, in my first year at Juilliard, I started taking auditions. Luckily, Michelle will appreciate this if she doesn't remember it. There was an audition for bass clarinet in the LA Philharmonic, my hometown orchestra. So in those days, they didn't use screens. So I went there and I was there for everybody to see. And Michelle's kind of laughing at the audition table. And then I played and it was like, you sound pretty good. Keep taking auditions. So that was a huge shot in the arm for me because, all my childhood youth idols were there because I go to the LA Philharmonic every week, hear them play the Rite of Spring. It was like in the first row and just like staring it up and hearing this. And then to play for them was an incredible experience.
Michelle says, how could I forget? She says, how could I forget?
Well, I thank you, because it was a pivotal moment for me. It gave me a huge shot in the arm. They said, keep auditioning. So then I auditioned for Cincinnati the next year, and I made the finals. And it was like, oh my gosh, am I ready for this? And so I didn't concentrate, and I didn't do well in the finals. But then a couple of months later, there was the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra, and I was ready. I was like, this is going to be my job, because I had worked with the music director, Dennis Russell Davies, at Aspen, and I really liked him. And this is principal clarinet in the St. Paul Chamber Orchestra. And I went there, and I was like, played really well. And then they said, okay, we'll let you know. And it was like, when are you going to let me know? It's like, we have to talk. And so the next morning, it's like I had to sleep overnight not knowing whether I got this job. But I was one of 2 finalists. And they called me up. Dennis called me and said, we decided to give the job to the other guy. I said, oh, it was Tim Paradise, wonderful. He had experience. He'd been playing in the Victoria Symphony in British Columbia for 5 years. He had experience, so we decided to give the job to him. But we also thought that we'd be holding you back, because don't you want to play symphonic music? And I said, yeah, but I could stand playing chamber orchestra music. He said, just keep working. And the next month I was in the Chicago Symphony. It was like, I had an audition, bass clarinet in the Chicago Symphony. And in the meantime, I made the finals. There were 4 finalists. I went back to school, and I heard the Chicago Symphony play on tour. They came to.
You didn't get any good parts in school.
Oh yeah. Okay. Teresa said, tell them how you didn't get any good parts in school. So in my first year at Juilliard, I never got any, really good assignments in the orchestra, So I was like, and in the beginning of my second year, I didn't get any good parts. And then soon as I got into the finals at CSO, they noticed me, and they said, oh, okay. So on my final concert at Juilliard, they assigned me to play principal clarinet on Galanta dances. And first bass clarinet in the rite of spring. So I had my 2 best parts in my last month at Juilliard. Contrary to Lawrence Gilliard, I did not walk off, but I stayed for the last concert, and it was with Myung-Whun Chung, who ended up being a great colleague because he started in the LA Philharmonic as assistant conductor the same time I started in Chicago as bass clarinet. And so all these, and then he invited me to play in the Seoul Philharmonic back in 2007 when he was music director there. So it's like making friendships, making connections, making these lifelong.
Were you at school with Yap? Was Yap there with you?
Yes, he was. Yes, he reminded me of that. The first time he came to guest conduct us, he said, you and I were at school together. And I said, oh, really? He said, yeah, I was sitting at the back of the violin section picking my nose while you were playing bass clarinet. And I said, oh my gosh. He said, yeah, I was studying with Miss DeLay. And then the same time you joined Chicago, I went off to be concertmaster in the Concertgebouw. And I said, oh my gosh, so we were at Juilliard at the same time.
And Jimmy Lin, was Jimmy Lin? He should be.
Oh, yeah.
He should
Jimmy,
be.
Chef Lin, he's busy now. He's doing the Taipei music. He's in Taiwan doing after a 2-week quarantine. Now he's able to go out and have this music academy and festival, which we did last summer. Mm-hmm. Amazing festival there. Yep. And I got to perform with Lynn Harrell, rest his soul. That was an amazing opportunity for me last summer. We did the Weber Quintet and Lynn Harrell played, and Jimmy Lin, he and I were at school. He was in pre-college at my first year, but we played our first thing was the Beethoven Septet. We got together and we've been cooking ever since, Chef Lin and I. Yeah, he's a great old friend and a wonderful colleague. And Shlomo Mintz was at school there, and all these great artists, Robbie McDuffie and Nigel Kennedy and who else? Joey Swenson. All these guys, that have gone on to have amazing careers. We're all at school. We were all there together, in the cafeteria, hanging out, and it was an amazing time to be in New York, to hear all the visiting orchestra, to hear the Boston Symphony at Carnegie Hall every couple of months. It was like I was luckily, I couldn't afford to get in, but luckily I could bribe the ushers to let me in to the dress circle, and I heard so many amazing performances, and
I was an usher. That was my job. I was one of the guys that was getting bribed. I loved it. Yeah, it was an amazing job for a music student. Amazing.
Oh, it's so amazing. And Carnegie Hall, to hear all the great orchestras come through there, and then you could go just to Alice Tully Hall and hear amazing chamber music. I got to hear the Guarneri Quartet with Harold Wright play the Rager Quintet. I'll never forget it. It was just like absolutely amazing.
What's your relationship with Harold Wright? You call him your mentor. Did you study with him? I mean, what exactly?
I studied with Harold. My first experience with Harold Wright was when I was 10 years old. My dad brought home this recording, and he said, "Here, listen to this." And it was Harold and Harris Goldsmith playing the Brahms sonatas.
Sure.
I was saying, wow, that really speaks to me. That's beautiful. And I wore that recording out. I listened to it over and over. Then my dad brought home this recording of The Shepherd on the Rock. Mm-hmm. And I listened to that, and it was like, that's what the clarinet is supposed to sound like. And so I had this in my ear. And as I was going through a high school, they used to broadcast the Boston Symphony, Evening at Symphony, on TV. And so I was always listening to watching Harold play on a TV, and I said, that's the way it's done. And I said, gosh, I really want to meet him. And one day I came home, and my sister came in, and my sister said, my friend Monica's dad knows Harold Wright. And I said, what? And she said, yeah, he plays the horn. And I said, really? So this is Dick Mackey. Richard Mackey, who was the third horn player in the Cleveland Orchestra, but at the time he had moved to Los Angeles after a stint in Japan, and he was playing shows in LA. He was playing Jesus Christ Superstar.
Oh.
And my sister, my middle sister, was best friends with his daughter, Monica. And she'd go over to his house and playing. And she goes, one day, I heard this really, really cool sound. And I walked in the back, and this guy, Monica's dad, was playing the horn. And before I knew it, I said, do you think I can meet Mr. Mackey? And she goes, sure. So I went over, and he said, yeah, Harold and I were at Marlboro together. We were like one of the early founding members of Marlboro. And I said, oh my gosh. So I got some of these recordings of the Dvorak Serenade and the Beethoven, octet, and Dick and Harold are playing together in this amazing Marlboro ensemble. And I said, okay, so then one day, Adele comes home and says, Monica's moving to Boston. Her dad just got into the Boston Symphony. And I said, oh my gosh. So we kept in touch. And when they'd come to New York, I said, do you think you could introduce me to Harold? So I met Harold Wright, and he came out smoking his pipe, and he's very relaxed. And it's like, oh my gosh, Mr. Wright, you're my idol. It was like, oh, well, that's okay. It was like, he was so gentle. And I said, do you think I could have lessons with you? And he goes, well, teaching really isn't my bag, but you can audition for Tanglewood. And I said, sure. So I auditioned for Tanglewood. And the first year I was at Juilliard, and I didn't get in. And I was like, oh, shoot, And then the second year I auditioned again, and Harold was there, and he says, do you want to go to Tanglewood? And I said, yeah. And so it was at Tanglewood where I started studying with him. And I said, during this time when I'm at school, do you think I could come and take a few lessons with you? So I would take a bus up to Boston from New York. And I remember one time it took me almost 5 hours to get there because there was a snowstorm. And I'd go and I'd try to time my lessons with him so that I could hear his concert. So there was one time he was playing the Brahms Trio at BU, at Boston University, with Leslie Parnas, and I barely made it there. I left plenty of time, but there was a snowstorm, and I barely made it before, just like a second before they started the Brahms Trio, And I'll remember, and then I used to take the bus all the time and take lessons with him.
Okay.
While I was
actually
at Juilliard.
What kind of things did he talk about? And you tried his setup. You tried his setup, didn't you? I'm curious about what it felt like. And
I said, could I try your setup? I said, please. He said, okay. So he and it was like, oh my God, this is the most colorful, beautiful, yet stable feeling mouthpiece and reed. And I could make such a huge dynamic range, and it would stay focused, and I could make all these colorful diminuendos. And it was like, I said, okay, I'm not giving you this mouthpiece back. You got to give it back. I said, okay. So that was when he said, it's really in your ear, and you have to cultivate a sound, and you have to cultivate a diminuendo, and you have to have a singing sound, and you should study with Marcel Moïse. You should go take lessons with Moïse. And I said, okay. So I signed up for Moïse's wind seminars, and I learned so much from listening to this old, and Moïse was like 95 at the time. And he would sit in, or maybe it was like 93. He would sit in this bouncy chair and drink Pernod and cough, and but it was like we learned so much just playing his melodies. He had this book called Tone Development Through Interpretation that were just literally melodies that he'd pull out, like the Saint-Saëns Symphony, or an opera tune from La Bohème, or something like that, or a Mendelssohn Symphony, or something like that. And he'd coach these melodies, and he almost wouldn't have to say anything. He'd just have to kind of like look at you, and just like, and then it was a, you know, a sort of a telepathic, magical experience. And this was in Brattleboro. And then the next year, I got into the Marlborough Festival, and I was able to spend half a summer at Marlborough. And Marlborough and Tanglewood aren't that far apart, so I'd go to Tanglewood and I'd meet with Harold, and I'd listen to the Boston Symphony, and hang out with Peter Serkin, and hang out with my old friend Dick Mackey. And that's when we cooked up the plan to record the Mozart Grand Partita with Marcel Moïse. Dick Mackey said, let's get together all these Marlborough alumni, and you can play basset horn. Because at that time, I had already played the basset horn in the CSO. In my first season, we did.
How old were you at this point?
So this was in 1979, the summer of 1979. So I had turned 22, and I'd been in the CSO for a couple of years. And my first season in the CSO, I played the basset horn on the Mozart Requiem with Giulini. So I'd had some experience playing basset horn. Even at UCLA, when I was growing up, I played the Grand Partita. So Dick Mackey said, let's get together a group, and we can all get together in Symphony Hall, and we could record the Grand Partita. And we got Moïse to come in and just sit in this big chair and kind of like inspire us. And Harold Wright was there.
What do you mean? Like, was he conducting? Was he just making comments? What do you mean inspire you?
He was looking at us with his eyes. Oh yeah, Teresa said, tell him when I got in trouble with Moïse. Well, okay. So there was one time where a bunch of students at the Moïse seminar wanted to get together and play a French piece for Moïse. And so we decided we were going to play the Mason Jones arrangement of the Tombeau de Couperin. And so we start playing this, and Moïse says, he starts coughing. Why you play? Mad. and I said, oh my God. And I said, well, can we just, you just play? No. And it was like, I got into trouble because I spoke up that I wanted to play this piece. No, because he wanted to draw our attention in and just kind of like look in his eyes so we could get this. Oh, look at my dog. Do you want to see my dog? Oh. He heard me coughing. He heard me coughing like Moïse, so he got freaked out and came down. So it was like almost magical. Yeah, at first Moïse would like kind of like give the downbeat, but we really had to rely on Harold to give cues, and it was like more like the Barenboim style of conducting. It wasn't giving any beats. It was just sculpting the piece, and it was Al Genovese on oboe, and that was just absolutely heavenly, oboe solo, and Myron Bloom on the horn, principal horn. He came in all the way from Paris. He was playing principal horn in the Orchestre de Paris at the time under Barenboim, and he was taking conducting lessons with Barenboim, and so he was talking about that, and it was like, wow, Barenboim is really a genius, isn't he? Yes.
Who's alive from that recording?
So, all right, Harold and all the Genoveses are, except for Nancy Genovese. She played second basset horn. Oh. She is the widow of Robert Genovese, who was playing second clarinet. He was second clarinet in Washington. Right. Harold and Robert played together in Washington, D.C. And so he came in and brought his wife, Nancy, and she played second basset horn. I played first basset horn. Harold and Robert, both gone. The oboes were Al Genovese, also of blessed memory. Wayne Rapier on second oboe. The bassoons were Matt Ruggiero and Roland Small. Roland Small just died a couple of years ago. I mean, you know, all these guys were, I remember them as being very youthful, you know. The bass player, Ray Benner, he was amazing. It was like he had a mute on the whole time, yet he got this like focused, incredible sound. I couldn't understand how he did it, but he had a secret. And he was in the Detroit Symphony at the time. He was assistant principal in Detroit. He's gone. The four horn players, three of them are still alive. You know, Myron Bloom recently died. Dick Mackey was on second horn. David Jolly, famed, beautiful horn player, and the fourth horn player. Let's see who was that. Oh, I've got this. Oh, I got it. Okay.
I can't believe you forgot it, John. This is like the highlights of your career, man.
I would remember it, but it'll take me a couple of minutes. Here it is. So it's Robert Rauch. No, David Jolly was playing fourth. Bob Rauch was playing third horn. And yeah. Okay, so here's Marcel Moïse. And
So I have that CD.
Yeah, but this is the original. This is the original release. It was on this company called Nautilus. It was they mostly did like audiophile recordings, and you know it was, and then Boston Records re-released it, and that was Wayne Rapier's recording company, and he's released like such beautiful recordings of Harold. There are 5 recital CDs of Harold Wright's concert performances and the re-releases of some of his commercial recordings, like his Mozart Concerto, his Weber Quintet, his Mozart Trio with Murray Pariah and Boris Kreutz. All these amazing recordings, and some you know, solos. And he's also got the Brahms sonatas and Harold's second recording of the Brahms sonatas with Peter Serkin and the Schumann fantasy pieces. So all these are amazing documents that we can hear and give. And this time I'm actually I've got time to put together some of the Chicago Pro Musica recordings that we did like 20 years ago that have never been released. But Chicago Pro Musica is the chamber music. We won the Grammy in 1985 for Best New Classical Artist. So we recorded the Soldier's Tale and the Facade by Walton, and those came out in 1985. We won the Grammy Award. And so subsequently, we've made several recordings, but there have also been a few recordings that have been sitting around in the can, and finally we're getting a chance to work on editing them and get them released. So in the next year or so, there's going to be a couple of new Chicago Pro Musica releases to watch out for. And we've got our Facebook site that you can keep an eye on.
Okay, John, now here's the situation. We know each other well, and we easily could sit down for 6 or 7 hours, I'm sure. Lorenzo, we're pushing midnight, and he lives an hour away, and I'm getting nasty. But I don't want to quickly. But I'm going to move it ahead a little, and then we'll go. I just want to quickly talk about when you went to Chicago. Didn't you finish your degree? Did you study with Marcellus there?
I did. Yeah. After I was in the Chicago Symphony for 2 years and had tenure, I said, you know, my parents always said, aren't you going to finish your degree before you go and to get the job? And I said, well, you know, this opportunity may only happen once in a lifetime. So I really have to take the Chicago Symphony. They said, but you haven't finished school. I said, okay. So after I was in the Chicago Symphony for 2 years, I decided to enroll at Northwestern University. And at that time, Robert Marcellus was the teacher. And I got to study with him for a year, and I made up my credits, and I took exams at Juilliard, and I took, courses at Northwestern in counterpoint and harmony and modern music and everything. I learned a lot at Northwestern, and this was part-time, and it was amazing. So I finally got my degree at Juilliard.
Tell us about Marcellus. I want to hear about Marcellus, and I also want to hear, because you've always played with a little bit of vibrato, and how he reacted to that. Because I played for him once, and he let me know his opinion on that one. So
yeah. Well, he always explained that vibrato on the clarinet is a no-no because of the way the overtone series is arranged, just as the horn is. Other instruments have equal overtones, but the clarinet has certain partials that are much more prevalent than others. So that's why other instruments need to use vibrato to create a sound that's pleasing, but the clarinet sound is pure and doesn't need vibrato, just like the horn sound. Now, there are certain horn players that use certain kinds of vibrato too. So there are different ways, there are, numerous ways to play these instruments. But so Marcellus used to have this masterclass at Northwestern every summer. And the first summer I was in the Chicago Symphony, he asked me to come and play for him. So I played the Brahms first sonata, the F minor sonata, with Ray Still's son, with Thomas Still on the piano. And he was very nice to me. He was very complimentary, and he did sort of lightly mention the vibrato, but he didn't really get down on me, because I knew well enough by then that he wasn't going to, and I didn't really, I learned so much from him in terms of phrasing that didn't require vibrato, and different things in like tricks of the trade, and how to play the Mendelssohn Italian Symphony, or how to play the solos in Schubert's great C major symphony. All those things. Those were the things that we focused on, is really delving into the details of the orchestral repertoire. And because that's what just like Michel, I gained these things, these tidbits from the experiences that my predecessors and my teachers, my mentors gave to me. So all of it goes in, and I hope I'm able to impart some of this knowledge to my students and people that will listen to me. It's like, but a lot of it was in, for Harold, a lot of it was just listening to him play. He would play a lot.
Mm. Oh, really?
I was thankful. Yeah.
Now I want to ask you, you did get a prize, for example, in the Munich competition and some other competitions, and you've also been back as a judge. And I'm curious, I asked Charlie Knight similar questions, but what did you, you came back how many decades later? And I'm wondering, like, was there anything that surprised you about being a judge, like your impression? What did you take away from the experience after having been on one end and X amount of decades later being on the other end?
Yes. So in 1982, I entered the Munich competition, and that's where Charlie and I met. And that's where Philippe Couper and I met, because we were the 3 prize winners. Charlie and Philippe got second prize, and I got third prize. And it was a lot of work. It was the most work I had ever done up until that point. I had to learn 11 pieces, and it was at the same time I was playing full-time in the Chicago Symphony. So it was a big order, but I spent a month in Munich and had a wonderful time. The first week was the preliminaries and the first round, and then we had to wait through the whole week. And so I had the chance to go sightseeing and see Salzburg and, sit in the beer garden. And it was just a great, and practice my German, And then 30 years later, I was on the jury. They asked me, and it was a cast of stars. It was Frankie Frankie, he and I really bonded then. It was Zabina, who will be a guest very soon. She and my wife Teresa studied with her, so we hung out in 2012 and had an amazing time with Frankie and Zabina and Carl Leisler was on that jury, and the chairman of the jury was Milan Turkovic, the great Viennese bassoon player, and then we got to meet Fabio Di Casola, who came in from Switzerland, and we had such a great time. And it's just a bonding time, a period of time, like Charlie mentioned, that it's the time that you spend having dinner and getting together at the beer garden with not only the people in the jury, but also the people that play. And my impression was that the general standard was so much higher when I heard when I was a judge than when I was a contestant. The general standard. We heard so many good players, but the artistic standard wasn't any higher. It was like we couldn't give a first prize. It was like nobody moved us at the first prize level. So we ended up giving 3 second prizes. And these are all really good, fine performers, but they all have a little bit of ways to go in order to be, absolute masters, So we felt like, we couldn't give a first prize. Frank, goes down in history as being the first and only first prize winner on the clarinet for many decades, until they changed the rules. I think Charlie or somebody explained the rules that you have to get certain number of points before you can be considered for a first prize, and nobody ever got enough points because we were just too hard at grading, or we just had very high standards. So that was the case. And the other thing is, there were very few American contestants. In Munich, I think when we were a judge in 2012, there was 1 American US player. And when I was there were several. I mean, Jonathan Kohler was there, and a couple of people that I have kept in touch with. That's when Jonathan and I really bonded. So it was, and Rainer. That was when I first met Rainer Wähler. He Zabina's husband, who's a wonderful artist and colleague and great friend. So Munich is a real tradition. They have an amazing administration. They've been able to administer this competition for 60 years almost, and it's been an amazing thing. They've produced Frank Cohen and Jesse Norman and people like that, and Nicholas Baldiru. It's just like to name one of the more recent winners.
Okay, I have 3 important questions for you, and then we're going to wind it down so Lorenzo doesn't call in sick.
Thanks, Lorenzo.
When we get back to working on me. Okay, first we're going to feed our own egos because you're such a special. You're such a special supporter of the show. You've heard every single word that every single person has said in real time. By the way, if anyone has heard all of the interviews, even if it's not in real time, just write in. We're curious. We've had a few emails about it, but there's been so many amazing things said. What just, if you had to, in 2 minutes, is there anything that just shocked you or changed your life or something incredibly memorable?
Okay. I can't really name one. I mean, it's obviously when my good friends come on, like Michelle Zukovsky and Franklin Cohen, I just, I want to hug them through the screen because their personalities, you've brought their personalities out. And that is a huge talent. Your ability to bring out the best in your colleagues far-flung all over the world is amazing. But one of the people that I've known ever since he was little, literally, is Anthony McGill. And Anthony grew up here in Chicago, and Anthony McGill
Oh,
is
Anthony's listening. We have another.
well, Anthony, I love you, man, because yeah, I mean, not only because I've known you ever since you were a kid, but because of what you represent to all of us as communicators and as human beings, and as, you know, a way to connect with people in a very, very good, deep, heartfelt way, and what you've done to recognize the humanity in people is something that we all aspire to. And you know, it's just like in this day and age, in this new reality, we have to be have goodwill. We have to, there's no room for bad vibes. And goodness only knows that there are a lot of bad vibes floating around there, and we want to channel the good vibes. So hearing what Anthony had said, knowing him for so many years was very special, and just in his own, you know, quiet, laid back way, you've really made a huge difference for everybody in the world. So it's like I'm moved by that. And you know, I just like all my friends that have come on, I'm just so happy that you've been able to get them to spend time with us like this on Saturdays, Andy. It's a gift. It's a true gift for all of us, and I'm so grateful.
Well, and we're inspired. I mean, obviously, we're inspired by Anthony, what he's turned this period into, and you know, Charlie really, he said something just very simple. He said it's our responsibility to be proactive, especially for the younger players. We've got to keep this going and all that, and that really connected with me. So I'm glad it's appreciated, John. And
I'm looking forward to seeing Charlie tomorrow. I watch him every Friday.
It's
so because I love the things that you say, Charlie, because it connects us to the world in a time when we can't connect to the world in person, you know, in body, but so we are in spirit. So thanks, everybody.
So I've been asking most people this at the end, just general clarinet playing. Someone who I know has given master classes around the world, who's a teacher in his own right, has you know, students as we're speaking. What are some of the things that commonalities that you're finding? Call them problems if you want, and things that you, generally speaking, in today's clarinet players, and the kinds of things that you're seem to be gravitating towards as a commonality. I understand every student's different and not everyone has it, but generally speaking, what would you say that one or two items would be?
Okay, overcoming the idiosyncrasies of the clarinet that are anti-musical. That's the one thing that everybody needs to do by having a very, very strong mental picture of what they need to hear, what they want to hear vocally. So emulating the vocal, you know, style is really important, and that goes for not only tone production but also articulation. You know, articulation can get messed up because you can't really see what's going on. So you really have to hear what's going on and get very, very clear picture in your ear of what you want to hear articulation wise. I think that's very, very important to have clear non-clarinet, you know, clarinet idiosyncratic articulation. If you move your tongue around, it can distort the sound. It can distort the articulation. So all of those things are just, you know, nuts and bolts of playing the clarinet that I think we can all learn from other artists, you know, singers, other great performers on, and we have to continue to do that, you know.
Great. And then along those lines, what advice are you going to give to young people or people generally, just musicians, let's say, and how this period right now is fitting in to all this for young musicians?
Right. Well, you know, it has unlocked a lot of creativity in a lot of people, young and old. It's so great to, you know, flip on the Facebook and see Itzhak Perlman tell a story, you know, or to see Yo-Yo Ma play a simple tune, or to hear Charlie talking about, what's going on in daily life. It's really something that we want to keep our ears open, and we want to keep our minds open, and we want to have goodwill and really express ourselves, follow our heart's desire to be able to make positive expressions and positive things that are going to, touch somebody else in a way that maybe you didn't expect them to be touched. I think that's our job, is to keep those communications open and with goodwill and with good vibes.
Great. And you're going to be doing an E-flat masterclass soon for the for Charlie's Juilliard class. So tomorrow, there you go. And I've got a some kind of Zoom meeting or something with his for his festival in 8 hours or something. So we're all in this together. So anyway, John,
we're all teaching. I mean, nowadays we're all teaching. Teresa and I are, but she's probably doing more teaching than I am really? Online, and it has become actually very effective. You can get real close to the camera and show where your tongue goes and all that stuff, and it's remarkably effective. I wouldn't have considered that it was going to be my primary way of communication until it had to become in March, and so now we're making the most of it. We're making lots of lemonade out of lemons.
Fantastic. John, we've exactly hit the 3-hour mark, which
no! Oh my gosh!
Well, okay. In fairness, we had Lori. Lori, but it is definitely the longest.
You're absolutely right.
We're gonna get together, and we're gonna do this for 6 hours without cameras, and say the same. Like, where did the time fly? But unfortunately, it can't be right now. But I look forward to the day that it is. Okay.
We didn't even talk about food in Hong Kong.
I know, and a few teaching things, but enough is enough. And Lorenzo's going to kill me. Yes.
Thank you. You got to go to bed. Bravo to both of you, and beautiful performance of the Beethoven. I woke up to this beautiful performance of Eroica this morning, and it was you two guys. It was so beautiful. And that was a surprise. So thank you.
Thank you.
I'll get the hook now.
Hey, Teresa.
Thank you.
How are you? Okay, guys. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. This was a
love you, everybody.
A session. Okay, be safe.
Thank you. Be safe.
Bye,
be healthy. Bye-bye.